Good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting of the Planning and Highways Committee. I'll hand over to Abby to announce housekeeping arrangements.
Thank you, Chair. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, please take instruction from staff and stewards. The assembly point is at Tudor Square. Please can I request everyone to switch mobile devices to silent mode so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. The meeting today will be webcast and the recording will also be available for people to view later through the Council's website. It is also possible that Sheffield Live TV will record and rebroadcast this meeting. You should be aware that the Council is a data controller under the Data Protection Act. Data collected during this webcast will be retained in accordance with the Council's published policy. By entering the meeting room, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting. While ever the meeting is open to the public, photography, video and sound recording of the proceedings is permitted. However, the Chair has discretion to withdraw or suspend this permission, for example, if the recording is disrupting the conduct of the meeting or is being undertaken in a manner which could capture personal information, or in the event that a member of the public participating in a meeting objects to being recorded. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Abby. Do we have apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We've got apologies from absence from Councillor Nikki Belfield and her sub is Councillor Mary Lee, and we've also had apologies from Councillor Andrew Sangar and his sub is Councillor Richard Williams. Thank you. And apologies from Councillor Tony Downing as well.
With nothing to exclude the press or the public? No. Declarations of interest? Oh, sorry, yeah. I'll ask members to introduce themselves. I'm Alan Woodcock, Chair for today's meeting and Chair for East Ecclesfield.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Mike Chaplin, representing Southey Ward, and I'm also a co-chair of this committee.
I'm Councillor Mary Lee, represent Darnell Ward.
Hello, I'm Janet Ridler, representing Stocksbridge and Upper Down.
And I'm Councillor Mark Whittaker, also representing Stocksbridge and Upper Don. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Councillor Gary Weatherall. I'm from Shire Green Brightside. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Marianne Elliott, Councillor for Gleadless Valley.
Henry Notted, Councillor for Hillsborough Ward.
Glynis Chapman, Councillor for Mosborough Ward.
Yeah, Richard Williams, Councillor for Stannington Ward, and as mentioned, substitute for Councillor Sanger.
Clifford Woodcraft, Councillor for Fulwood.
Councillor Kaisal Huddle for Darnell Ward.
Declarations of interest. Richard?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I declare that I'm a member of the Friends of Loxley Valley. Excuse me, but I don't even know if they're here, which would suggest I have no dealings with them at all about the application, which is the one for Loxley Road.
One of the TPOs is in my ward, but I have no prior money or anything, so. Minutes of the previous meeting, 11th of November. Get there. Page 11, 12, 13, site visits will be sent to members, so they're aware of when as well. Thank you. Page 15 of the agenda, tree preservation order number 493 Old Chapeltown Railway Station, Chapeltown, Sheffield, S35 to QX. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. So as introduction, my name is Jonathan Galley. I'm the Community Tree Officer within Planning. I'll provide a brief overview of the reasons for making TPO 493 at the old Chapeltown Railway Station, an overview of the objections received and my responses as well. The order can be viewed in full in Appendix A of the report. Tree Preservation Order 493 was made on 26th of June 2025 following the Council's receipt of information that tree felling and significant earthworks had taken place at the site of the old Chapeltown Railway Station. A site visit was carried out on 18th of June 2025, where it was confirmed that a substantial area of trees to the west and southwest of the building had already been felled, and that extensive groundworks, soil build-up and compaction had occurred around the rooting areas of retained trees, particularly to the front of the property adjacent to the road. This is demonstrated in images 1 and 2 of Appendix D. The site contains a group of mixed broadleaf trees and an ancient woodland edge visible from Station Road and White Lane, which is a busy through route between Sheffield and Rotherham, as well as into Chapeltown. These trees make a clear contribution to local amenity, forming part of the wider woodland character and edge of Parkin Wood, which is designated as ancient semi-natural woodland and a priority habitat deciduous woodland under the UK Biodiversity Action Plan. At the time of the site visit, no planning application or prior communication had been made to the local planning authority, and it was not possible to determine the intended extent of the works or whether further felling was planned. The trees were evaluated using a tempo assessment, scoring 19, definitely meriting TPO, and this assessment can be seen in Appendix B. Given the change in activity on the site, the sensitivity of the ancient woodland edge, and the evident amenity value of the trees, it was considered expedient in the interest of amenity to impose immediate protection through an area order. One duly made objection confirming the order has been received and can be viewed in Appendix C of the report. The key points raised are as follows. 1. Lack of public amenity value. The objection argues that some trees are not publicly visible and therefore do not contribute meaningfully to amenity. Officer response: amenity was assessed using the tempo system by an appropriately qualified officer, considering not only visibility, but the tree's health, reasonable retention spans, and interaction with the ancient woodland. The assessment confirmed that the trees collectively provide sufficient amenity to justify protection. 2. Poor or unsafe condition of some trees. Concerns were raised by the objector about the age and condition of trees on site, stating safety issues as a reason not to confirm the order. Response: a TPO does not prevent reasonable management. Safety-related work, including the removal of dead trees and urgent works to address immediate risk, is exempt. Any evidence-based arboricultural report submitted with a future application to work on the protected trees would be fully considered on its merits. The purpose of the order is not to prevent management, but to ensure oversight so that works do not disproportionately harm amenity. 3. Conflict with future development proposals. The objector notes that future planning applications may be submitted for the site and is concerned that the order will prevent development. The officer's response: a TPO cannot prevent or override the planning process. If planning permission is granted and requires tree removal, a TPO cannot prevent this from happening. Conversely, should a proposal be refused, it would be because of the planning merits, not the existence of the order. The TPO also ensures that any retained trees have additional protection should planning permission be granted in the future to add protection in addition to any tree-related planning conditions that may be imposed. 4. Responsible prior management. The objector states that historically the trees have been managed appropriately and therefore the order is unnecessary. Officer response: the recent felling and earthworks represented a significant change in activity on the site. With no prior engagement from the landowner and with further works potentially imminent, the council had clear justification for taking precautionary action and protecting the remaining trees by making the order. The amenity provided by the trees has been assessed as warranting continued protection, which we're seeking as part of this report. 5. Procedural concerns and lack of consultation. The objector queried why no consultation occurred before serving the TPO. Officer response: the legislation does not require that anyone is notified prior to a TPO being made. This is purposeful as it enables councils to act swiftly where trees are at risk and to prevent preemptive felling where someone thinks that a TPO might be made. Consultation takes place after the provisional order is served and before it is confirmed, which has been done in this case. In conclusion, the ongoing protection of the trees covered by TPO 493 is expedient in the interest of amenity, and it is my opinion that the issues raised in the objection do not outweigh the justification for making the order. I therefore recommend that Tree Preservation Order 493 be confirmed without modification. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Members, questions? Members, comments? Right. Can we take a vote, please, by show of hands? 4. 9, 10. Against? Abstain? Abstain? Thank you, that is carried. We now move to item 8, Tree Preservation Order 495A, Hallam Towers, 272A Fulwood Road, Sheffield, S10 3AZ, page 37 of the agenda. Back to you, Jonathan, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So again, I'll outline the context of the making of the Tree Preservation Order and then summarise the objections received and responses. Tree Preservation Order 495A was made on 4th of September 2025 following the receipt of a Section 211 notice proposing the felling of 1 oak and crown reduction of 2 sycamores within the Hallam Towers development. The reference for this application can be found within the report. A copy of the order can also be viewed in Appendix A of the report. The trees are protected to a limited extent by Section 211 of the Town and Country Planning Act as they are situated within the Endcliffe Conservation Area. A site visit was undertaken on the 8th of August 2025, during which the 3 trees, 2 sycamores and 1 oak, were assessed using the tempo methodology. The tempo assessment can be viewed in Appendix B. The assessment concluded that the trees form a cohesive group with reasonable retention spans and good outward vitality. The group is centrally situated between Hallam Towers and Hallam Towers Mews developments. The group provides amenity value, predominantly within the site, but also with limited views from the public highway at the Manchester Road entrance, where the oak in particular is expected to increase in visibility as it matures and as it gets larger. The works proposed in the Section 211 notice were not adequately justified and would have resulted in an unacceptable loss of amenity. It was therefore considered expedient in the interest of amenity to protect the group G1 through a TPO. The trees are in good condition, being early mature and have an estimated retention span of 40 to 100 years. Images of the trees and their context can be viewed in Appendix D. 3 duly made objections were received and can be viewed in Appendix C. The summary of the objections and my responses are as follows, but as with the previous report, there is a full discussion of them in the report too. So number 1, proposal for a management plan instead of the order being confirmed. Objectors suggested that confirmation be withheld in favour of a site-wide tree management plan. The officer responds, a management plan would be welcome in the future, and this is something that I as community tree officer may be able to assist with in terms of signposting to resources and appropriate professionals, and something that in general the council would see as a positive move. However, without confirming the TPO, the works in the Section 211 notice that was submitted, including the felling of the oak, could proceed immediately. Therefore, confirmation remains necessary and appropriate to prevent unjustified harm to amenity. 2, concerns about safety due to the tree's position on a steep slope and potential wind exposure. Objectors suggested that the trees might be unstable because of their position on the slope and with the wind conditions around Hallam Towers. Officer response, the trees were inspected from ground level and found to display good outward condition with no visible indicators of elevated risk. Guidance from the National Tree Safety Group shows that the risk from trees overall is extremely low, and tree owners are encouraged to maintain proportionate systems of inspection. Any future safety-related work supported by appropriate evidence can be considered through the application process and would not be prevented by the order if they were justified. 3, damage to vehicles from tree-related debris and bird droppings. Objectors cited nuisance and costs arising from debris and bird droppings falling on vehicles parked in uncovered parking bays. Officer response, Legislation and government guidance do not identify debris, seasonal shedding or bird droppings as factors carrying weight in amenity or expediency assessments for tree preservation orders. Alternative mitigations, such as appropriate pruning to a good arboricultural standard or installing canopies above parking spaces with appropriate planning consents, may address these issues without removing or disfiguring trees. It should also be noted that there are a number of large mature trees within the site with the potential to impact uncovered parking bays. If each of these were to be felled or inappropriately pruned to prevent seasonal or naturally occurring processes, then the effect on amenity would be devastating. The benefits of the trees outweigh the limited detriment associated with natural processes. 4. Liability associated with the trees. Objectors queried whether the council would assume liability for any damage caused by the trees should the tree preservation order be confirmed. Officer response: a TPO does not affect tree ownership, who has responsibility for trees, or whether there may exist a duty of care upon anyone to avoid acts or omissions that could reasonably be foreseen to cause harm to others. The TPO simply controls the quality of works to ensure amenity is not disproportionately harmed. Exemptions allow urgent works to address immediate risk, and applications submitted with suitable arboricultural justification for works will be properly considered, and the works will generally be allowed if the justification is proportionate to their relative effect on amenity. 5. Suggestion that the trees require management, including topping, to maintain the site and to limit debris. Officer response: the council recommends that tree management, particularly of mature trees or trees of significant amenity value, should be guided by professional guidance. Whilst trees may require work for safety reasons or to manage their relationship to their surroundings, the scope of any work should be reasonable and in line with good arboricultural practice. In this instance, the proposed in line with good arboricultural practice. As previously stated, the process of applying for consent to carry out works to a protected tree controls the quality and impact of work. It does not prevent reasonable works from being carried out. And 6, concern that a tree was misidentified as an oak when in fact it was a sweet chestnut. Officer response: the trees were correctly identified by the council's community tree officer. What were described by objectors as chestnuts were in fact caps from acorns from the oak tree. Leaf morphology clearly confirms the species identity. In conclusion, the trees in Group G1 provide meaningful amenity, are in good condition with long-term prospects, and their protection is evidently expedient following the submission of the Section 211 notice. In my opinion, the objections raised do not outweigh the justification for making the order. As failure to confirm the order would mean that the oak could be removed immediately and the 2 sycamores may be inappropriately pruned, I recommend that Tree Preservation Order 495A be confirmed without modification. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Members' question? Mark?
One of the objections is that it's on sloping land. Well, I always assumed that the reason why trees were all the way around reservoirs very often is to stabilise sloping land. Would you not think that the tree roots here are more likely to stabilise this land than destabilise it? Thank you.
So I probably couldn't comment on the state of the ground underneath, as that's probably outside of my remit, and there are potentially other factors that could affect that. However, if a tree is showing that it is in good condition, it shows outwardly good vitality, and then there are no obvious defects such as fungus that might affect the root system, then in general it would be assumed that the tree is adapted to the surroundings that it is in. So although instability may occur if there was significant changes to those surroundings, in general they would be in a fairly stable position unless a defect was noted that might affect that.
Any further members' questions? Richard?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously, as it says in the report, if a TPO is granted, then that doesn't block work being done on the trees where appropriate. But does some form of plan and authorisation prior to the work being done have to be sought? Or can they just go ahead and do what they think is appropriate?
So the trees would remain to be covered by the conservation area anyway. The confirmation of the TPO would mean that they were then under further protection of a tree preservation order. The application process is broadly similar to work on trees in either of those situations. The difference is that with a tree preservation order, we're able to either deny refuse to grant applications. We can grant lesser works if perhaps we think that what has been submitted might not be reasonable or might affect the health of the tree or amenity. So in essence, the property managers could submit an application for works. It would be assessed broadly in the same way as a Section 211 notice. The difficulty here is that with a Section 211 notice, we either have to make a TPO or allow the works to go ahead. So this is why, in this instance, a TPO has been made. Anything further can be handled with the application process.
Any further members' questions? Members' comments? Mike?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I cannot see any material reasons why we cannot approve your recommendation. If the owners of vehicles can always obtain covers to put over vehicles if they're going to be left out in the open for extended periods. Although nothing in the world will stop birds from doing their droppings even in the open, let alone from trees. Although birds do typically have favoured spots from trees that they like to use for their toilet facilities. I noticed that one vehicle seems to be parked near an undercroft, so I'm a bit surprised that the vehicle wasn't moved into sorry, that's from the picture on page 64 in your report. Is it possible to move that vehicle in and underneath?
So that vehicle, as it's explained in one of the objections as well, that vehicle, it has an assigned parking space, and it isn't under the cover of the undercroft. I would, as I've sort of stated in the report as well, that is the case for numerous car parking spaces around the development. There are some that are covered. There are also some that are not covered and have trees in fairly close proximity to them. So in this instance, they're not able, from the information they've provided in the objection, to move the car. However, the other options that I've sort of set out in the report would be preferable to the Section 211 notice.
Yeah, so they could obtain a cover for the car to protect it. Thank you.
Any further comments? Liz?
Yes, thank you. I think, Mike, if you read the letter from one of the gentlemen owning the car, he has bought covers in the past, but because it's a narrow space, the wind comes and blows the cover off, so it's got to be tied down. But I can understand this gentleman's problem, because where I live, communal car park, and we all fight not to be underneath the trees, not designated spaces, and if you arrive there late, unfortunately, you're under the tree, and you have to go out early the following morning to clean your car before you can set off. But and to me, these trees look as though they're self-seeded. Sycamores do it all over the place. But I don't see what else we can do about it, really. It's just a hazard.
Thank you, Glynis. Any further comments? Move to a vote, please, for show of hands. We now move to item 9, applications under various acts and regulations. We have 3 applications to hear today. The first one being 9A, planning application 25/02046/FUL, Malik House, 41 Springfield Road, Sheffield, S7 2GE, and it's page 69 of the agenda, and I will now ask Chris to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just talk you through the slides first of all. As you can see from the description there, the application is to use a dwelling house as a nursery within Class E and a small, a single-storey side extension and canopy to the front. So the property is, as identified in the red line there, on the western side of Springfield Road, close to its junction with Aberdale Road and Archer Road, and Aberdale Road South, in fact. And there's an aerial view. This is a view looking up from the junction. That's from the Archer Road junction. That is the property there, on the slightly in shadow under the tree, Chair, beyond the black vehicle. You can see there that there are waiting restrictions on this side of the, well, parking restrictions this side of the road at that point. That's looking down the hill. So where the large tree is, in the centre of the picture, the house is to the right of that. It's worth noting through these images, Chair, if it will move, the boundary treatments that are present up and down the street, largely relatively low walls with vegetation behind them in some cases. This image is looking, so the house now that is to be converted is on the right of the picture there, sort of in between the two parked cars. And here it is, it's just to the other side of the red car, slightly obscured by the tree. This is within the garden area of the property. This is on the southern side of the house, and this would be the main play area for the facility. You can see on the left of that picture the boundary fence, which is a boundary between the property and a small two-storey group of flats, which the first floor of which overlooks the site. This is also the front garden, front side garden, looking towards Springfield Road. You see the boundary wall there that you could see in the previous pictures. Similarly, here a further shot of that, and that is looking from the boundary with the flats towards Springfield Road. They are the flats which overlook the site, and with that's just an access gate to them. You can see that the first floor of that building would be in relatively close proximity to and overlook the site, or the area would be visible from there. This is a slightly better image that shows that relationship further. So the house is on the right, the boundary fence on the right, and a block of flats, the small block of flats to the left. In the distance, if you like, is a converted a group of garages with a couple of flats above, and they also are in relatively close proximity to the site. This space is between, and I'll come back to this later on, this space lies between the rear of the house, proposed nursery, and the boundary wall. So the boundary, you can see the boundary gate there, boundary fence, the hit and miss fence, between the flats and the dwelling. And that is a neighbouring, immediately adjacent bungalow, which faces the site, and is taken from the position of where the extension would be, and that's looking in the opposite direction. That's slightly further back from the site, in the sort of the front yard area, with the house, the to be converted house on the left, and the adjacent bungalow on the right. And you can see hopefully that the relationship between all those properties there in the image on the bottom particularly. This is the existing layout of the site, and existing appearance of the building. And you can see here that towards the bottom of the picture in particularly, there's a wraparound single-storey extension to the dwelling, and you can see some fence lines that have emerged on the plans, and they are to denote play areas, which I'll come on to shortly. There are no alterations to the house itself, other than the extension that's been added to it, and that's its external appearance. So if you recall the position of the single-storey bungalow immediately adjacent, that is, you can pick it out on the top right-hand corner of that image. and that is the layout as proposed. And I'll leave that there, I think, which is where I'll just kind of run through a bit of a further introduction, and I'll refer to that from time to time. So, as I say, it's for use of a dwelling as a nursery with the single-storey extensions. It's in a predominantly residential area, which is close to a local shopping centre, including the public house, the Robin Hood, to the south. Now, it's currently a 4-bedroom detached dwelling, and the 2-storey flats, as you saw, lie to the south, and a single-storey house to the north. It's a signalised junction at the bottom of Springfield Road, with several roads feeding into it, Springfield Road, Aberdale Road South, Archer Lane. And opposite the site is semi-detached housing. The nursery would be accommodated on both floors of the building with provision for 55 children on site at any point in the day. It would operate Monday to Friday from 7 in the morning till 7 in the evening. There's significant support and objection as set out in the report that members will have seen, and I would need to add to that with supplementary report, Chair, that I'll come on to shortly. The principle of the proposal is acceptable in that policy H10 in the UDP supports the provision of community facilities in housing areas, and MPPF paragraph 100 requires great weight to be given to early years provision. UDP policy CF1 also promotes community facilities. In terms of the tilted balance, Chair, that's often referenced in paragraph 11, that isn't engaged in this particular instance because the relevant policies are in date. Equally, the proposal is not for the provision of housing. So, policy H14 in the UDP, however, requires assessment of impacts on various normal, typical planning considerations, including living conditions of existing residents and highway safety. There is evidence of need for the facility in the area, in that it's one of the highest anticipated demand areas in the city for early years childcare, especially for children under the age of 2. The physical alterations to the building are acceptable. There's no adverse impact on the locality, the building itself, or on neighbouring occupiers from the physical extension of the building. The two key issues are around noise and disturbance to existing residents and highway safety. In terms of noise, that would arise from the presence of larger groups of children, mostly when using external areas adjacent to neighbouring residential gardens, and also internally in warmer weather conditions when windows would be open, etc. And there might typically be sort of 20 or so children plus staff outside, which has the potential to cause noise and disturbance to immediate neighbours on a daily basis. Officers had significant concerns about that, and more recently amended proposals have been submitted, which include some measures put forward by the applicant to minimise and reduce that potential noise disturbance to a level which they consider as acceptable, and officers have reconsidered those submissions. So I'll just talk very briefly through those. I don't know if members can pick out, but and recall from my initial kind of introduction, on the top side of that drawing, there's a kind of almost like a triangle of shaded area, which is the flats building, which is to the kind of southwest of the nursery building. So along that boundary would be erected a 2.4 metre high acoustic fence that would also form a return towards the top right-hand corner of the site and down the boundary on the left-hand side. which is to part of the garden of the flats. So there'll be a 2.4 metre high acoustic fence in that location. Then, quite importantly, the garden area would be split so that the general play area, where children would spend most of their time externally, would be between what I can only describe as kind of a zigzag line, which is set a few metres away from the boundary with the flats. That would also be acoustic fencing, which would contain the vast majority of the external play in that location. The other space, beyond the zigzag line and between the boundary with the flats, is intended to be a calm play area and in fact a sensory garden, which would be seen to be beneficial to children with special educational needs and disabilities. So that what that achieves in the applicant's view, on which we agree, is it provides a separation to the most sensitive area of potential noise disturbance. The bungalow on the other side, number 43, is separated by the existing building, screened by the existing building, and the proposed single-storey extension, and the bin store up in the top right-hand corner of the site. There was initially also a suggestion of a 2.4 metre acoustic fence in the bottom right-hand corner of the site, alongside the hard surfaced area, but officers felt that offered little benefit in terms of noise reduction, and that there wasn't so much noise activity there, and also that it would be harmful to visual amenity to the street scene to have a 2.4 metre fence in that location. So that's no longer the case, and that is a standard 2 metre fence in that position. Alongside that, an updated noise assessment was undertaken, where further more detailed calculations were implemented and produced an outcome which, along with these other measures, we felt was more satisfactory. And also there is a proposal as part of that, to offer mitigation in terms of specific hours of external play, or hours when external play wouldn't occur, and the more sensitive times, such as from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the morning, or 6 o'clock till 7 o'clock at night, and also to limit the numbers of children outside at any one time. This is set out in the report, by the way, Chair, on page 86 and 87. So to limit the numbers of children at any one time as well. So with those measures in place, we feel that we can now support the scheme on noise grounds, and an initial concern around noise can be satisfactorily resolved and could be controlled going forward with appropriate conditions on things such as implementation of the items you see on the drawing, and the operation of the facility, and on those hours and maximum numbers, etc. The other issue is traffic and highway safety. Springfield Road is a busy route to and from Abbeydale Road, and experiences queuing traffic, extensive on-street parking, including on the pavement, as you could see in some of those images previously. And that's necessary to allow vehicles to pass. The applicant has put forward measures including a minibus service so it'd be a shuttle service for, I think it's 12 to 16 children, some staggered start times to ease traffic impact. But officers feel that there would be a significant uplift in the drop-off and collection and general movements and car parking, opening doors, getting children out, etc. on the busy road, that would adversely affect the free and safe flow of traffic on Springfield Road. It's also been suggested in an additional or quite recent traffic submission that a survey of prospective users puts the modal shift people attending the facility at around 26% by car, which is a relatively low number. But our view on that is that the national data on similar facilities in similar locations suggests that it's more typically 60 to 70%. And we feel that whilst that might be a kind of an aspiration or an intention to achieve that level of modal split, it is something that's extremely difficult to control or enforce going forward. So that we didn't find that persuasive, Chair. You'll see that there's reference, or you will have seen that there's reference in the representations to the intended benefits to the city and the particular location of having a facility that accommodates provision for a number of groups with protected characteristics. That's very much acknowledged, and there's a section in the report on the public sector equality duty that deals with that. But equally, we don't feel that there's anything specific about this location that delivers those benefits, and that, in other words, similar benefits with the same operator or a similar operator could be achieved in a different location without the identified highway safety concern. So, whilst the principle is acceptable and weight is given to the demand for the facility, and the resolution of the noise impacts, we still feel that the highways impacts are very significant, can't be easily controlled, and are sufficient to outweigh those factors, Chair. So our recommendation remains as a refusal on highway safety grounds. I would just quickly go to the supplementary information. It is quite lengthy, but I don't need to read it all out, I don't think, because a lot of it is reflecting comments that have been previously made. So, following publication of this is item 3 on the supplementary information. Following publication of the main agenda report and the submission of additional information and minor amendments to the proposals as I've described, the following further representations have been received. We've had 5 further objections, 2 from new objectors, 3 from people who've already commented, and that brings that total now to 39. And they raised comments about the character of the area, that the need isn't sufficiently evidenced, that noise would remain a significant problem, and the acoustic fence would have little effect, that the transport mitigation measures are unrealistic, and reiterating that there is existing difficulty and pressure on Springfield Road with other facilities nearby, such as the church on Grove Road and people parking to go to the district centre. In support, there have been 2 additional letters of support, bringing the total supporters to 82. One being from a special education needs and disabilities charity, Sparkle Sheffield, which offers support to children and their families through the existing service user. They are existing service users of the current childminding facility at the site. The comments in support here are listed, and it goes back to what I was suggesting earlier around there being demand for such provision in the area, endorsement of the current operator, a counter view on the experience of dropping off and picking up with the current childminding facility, in other words, it's not a sufficient problem in their eyes, and just emphasising the need for good quality early years support. I think then the only other thing I wanted to raise, Chair, is that there is a slight correction in the report. On page 88, we refer to the driveway there in the front as having a parking facility in addition to the minibus for one staff member. But with some tweaks to the layout, Chair, that's no longer the case. However, we don't feel the displacement of one vehicle has any more significant impact on our view on the highway safety matters. And that's all, Chair. So the recommendation is to refuse planning permission on highway safety grounds.
Thank you, Chris. We have speakers for and against on this application. So we'll go with against the application. The first speaker, which will be 5 minutes, and I'm going to be strict because there's a lot. Diane Harris, please. Pardon? Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Yep.
My name is Eric McLennan. I've lived on Springfield Road for 36 years, directly opposite number 41, and I've seen the traffic levels on this road increase significantly in recent years. Since learning of this application in September, which was only by word of mouth, local residents have been extremely concerned. A WhatsApp group has been formed and not a single local resident has expressed support for this proposal. This application would convert a family home into a commercial nursery, permanently altering the residential nature of this part of the road. The plans include prominent signage and high fencing, as well as access for a minibus, which are all out of keeping with our surroundings. Aside from a small dental practice housed in a former home, this section of Springfield Road is entirely residential. Approving this application would introduce a high-intensity commercial use into the middle of a residential street with long-term consequences for local amenity. Traffic is a serious and growing issue. At peak times, queues regularly extend around 200 metres from the traffic lights at the junction with Abbeydale Road up to past the junction with Grove Road. Many drivers try to avoid this by cutting down Hastings Road, a quiet residential side street. It's also become a preferred route for some drivers because of the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit on Carter Knoll Road, whereas the speed limit on Springfield Road is currently 30 miles an hour. Springfield Road now functions as a main commuter route to the Ring Road, Chesterfield, and to the M1 South, and there's also a bus route. It is simply too narrow to absorb the extra traffic a full-day, year-round nursery would generate. The proposal offers no on-site parking for staff, parents, or visitors. Pavement parking is already common, forcing pedestrians, wheelchair users, and parents with prams onto the road. There is no safe crossing point, and all drop-offs and pickups would intensify stopping, starting, and car door activity at already congested times. The proposed minibus arrangement is also unsafe. The single on-site space is too tight, and the vehicle will need to reverse within the site or onto the road, posing risks for children, families, and other road users. The applicant's own noise assessment contradicts their reassurance that impacts will be minimal. Section 2.3 notes that traffic noise dominated at all times, making it difficult to record noise levels from children. Section 319 states that Springfield Road is heavily trafficked throughout the nursery day. Section 332 confirms frequent stopping, starting, and car door noise due to queues at the lights. In reality, the nursery will generate daily and unavoidable traffic, rubbish collections, food and catering deliveries, professional visitors, repeated parent trips, regardless of any drop-off guidance issued to the parents. These movements add substantially to congestion and noise. Air pollution is already high due to queuing traffic, especially during peak hours. Locating a children's nursery with outdoor play areas directly beside idling vehicles is inappropriate and potentially harmful. It's worth recalling that the council previously refused the Robin Hood pub's outdoor seating proposal on the basis of air quality concerns and parking pressures. The same issues arise here. The planning officer describes the neighbouring houses opposite as 2 stories, but in fact they are 3-storey properties. These taller houses and the neighbouring flats directly overlook the proposed outdoor play area, raising clear safeguarding concerns. The relationship between the playground and the surrounding properties has not been properly assessed. The applicants have clearly invested significant time and money on their planning application, and yet none of this has been spent on consultation or engagement with the local community. The applicants even declined an invitation to speak at a local Millhouses community meeting. Most of the supporting comments on the planning portal come from people outside the immediate locality, and none from those who would live with the daily impact of a large wraparound nursery on their doorstep. In conclusion, whilst we agree that traffic impact in this area is the major concern, this proposal would also introduce high-intensity commercial use onto an already overloaded residential road. Residents strongly disagreed with the planning officer's conclusion that noise and loss of amenity have been resolved. These impacts remain significant. Traffic, although the most prominent issue, is not the only one. Road safety, parking pressure, noise, air pollution, and loss of residential character and amenity are substantial issues that cannot be mitigated or ignored.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Diane? And you have 5 minutes.
My name is Diane. I'm a retired primary and early years teacher, and I've lived on Springfield Road for 35 years. I want to highlight several really misleading and unrealistic statements in the DICE transport assessment. Site access and pedestrian safety, page 8. DICE claims the site benefits from wide, uncluttered and continuous footways with good visibility due to its corner location. This is completely inaccurate. 3 neighbouring houses sit closer to the corner than the proposed site. By 8:45 a.m, the road is frequently lined with cars, creating a blind bend for anyone exiting their driveways. DICE's own photos show vehicles partly on the pavement, and our local photos show wheelie bins, temporary bus stops and parked cars, further restricting visibility. Real incidents illustrate the danger. A mother lifting a toddler into a car from the roadside before making a dangerous U-turn at a busy period. A partially sighted elderly neighbour walked to the post office at 7 a.m, it's open, just to cross safely. A mobility scooter user was blocked by a van and a bin and needed help. From my experience, rushed working parents frequently park on pavements, across driveways and on double yellow lines. DICE's claim of a safe and cluttered environment is extremely misleading. Sustainable travel behaviour, page 9. The parental travel survey is based on only 31 potential families for a nursery that doesn't yet exist, making it statistically weak and unreliable. Claims that 42% will use buses, 39% a shuttle and only 26% will drive, ignoring national trends, are misleading. Evidence from the planning portal contradicts this. Using postcode data and parent comments up to September show at least 66% travelled by car, typically 1 to 7 miles, with one prospective parent coming from S65, Rotherham. Most working parents drive. Managing toddlers and bags on public transport, especially at rush hour or in bad weather, is simply not practical. The majority supporters are not local, directly contradicting one agent's claim of a localised catchment typically associated with nursery use. Google Maps analysis reinforces this. Of the 81 supporters, only around 20 could realistically walk, cycle or use public transport, and just 4 live within a 20-minute walk. That raises the question, is the nursery meeting a genuine local need? Minibus use is rare in nurseries and future owners may not adopt it, so it cannot reliably inform travel or transport assumptions. Therefore, the extensive car use and its impact on congestion and parking has been underestimated. Staff travel plan and visitor impact, page 8. Car sharing, bus travel and local recruitment are unrealistic given the national shortage of trained nursery staff. You can't dictate how they travel. Staff levels will be far higher. Ambitious plans for training, early intervention meetings, advice clinics will increase visitors. They've also overlooked peripatetic health and social care staff, SEND specialists, apprentices and volunteers. This is not enforceable and therefore the plan will not reduce traffic or improve safety. On-street parking survey, page 12, Springfield Road. DICE describes its survey as robust, yet it consisted of only 1.25 hours of observation one morning and 3 photographs. Local photos provide a more accurate reflection of peak time conditions, showing heavy parking and congestion. The survey ignores key periods, lunchtime, after school, pickups and evenings. By contrast, page 89 of the officer's report uses multiple times and visits to evidence indiscriminate parking and congestion. Permanent on-street parking and daily use were not assessed. Claims that Springfield Road parking is well managed or available are contradicted by residents, including the applicants, visitors and workers already struggling for spaces, indicating the proposal would worsen congestion. The agent references SEND provision but completely overlooks the additional needs of local elderly residents, many of whom have physical and sensory impairments. This demonstrates a concerning lack of awareness of the very community in which the applicant lives. The health, independence and safety of these neighbours, including heightened risk from increased traffic, must be properly assessed, particularly for those unable to advocate for themselves. This assessment does not reflect local realities. This wraparound nursery serves working parents who travel predominantly by car at fixed times, yet transport and parking impacts are seriously underestimated. The DICE report is neither robust nor objective. It exaggerates safety and sustainability, downplays congestion and traffic, and relies on limited data and unrealistic assumptions. Many residents here are educators who value nursery provision, but this location is not suitable for a large wraparound setting. I respectfully ask the committee to refuse the application.
Thank you, Diane.
I hope you understood I was speaking too quickly.
Paul?
Yep.
5 minutes. Paul,
Okay.
thank you.
I'm Paul McGrath. I live at 54 Springfield Road, and I'm the chair of the local charity Sharrow Community Forum, supporting children and young people and families. I object to this application on 4 main grounds: loss of residential amenity, parking and traffic congestion, noise impact and air pollution. Together, these show that this development would cause serious and permanent harm to residents. The proposed nursery would directly overlook the communal gardens of Millhouses Lane Flats. These gardens are not simply outdoor areas, they are essential quiet sanctuaries for many residents, particularly elderly and vulnerable with physical and sensory impairments. Residents rely on these gardens daily for peace, well-being and social contact. This application would permanently remove that peaceful environment. The proposed play area has minimal separation from residents' gardens, making noise intrusion unavoidable. The first floor flats and number 38 directly overlook the site, meaning noise will not be stopped by the acoustic fencing. Indeed, the first floor playrooms will project noise over the fences into the gardens. Whilst the application refers to 32 children, the potential is 55. Residents already experience distress from shouting and ball kicking across the shared fence. A resident with a diagnosed neurodivergent condition chose this location for its peace and quiet and has had to complain verbally to Malik House. With 32 or 55 children outside, relaxation would become impossible. The nursery, operating 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. 52 weeks a year, removes all respite. This is not a short-term disturbance, it's a permanent daily loss of amenity. The suggestion that this impact is outweighed by benefits is strongly rejected by residents. The parking on Grove Road. The DICE parking report is deeply misleading because it was taken on one single day at one moment in time and does not reflect daily reality. Many houses on Grove Road have 2 or more vehicles on the road. Trade vehicles, deliveries and builders park regularly. The report claims 44 spare spaces, does not match lived experience. The road is frequently full. Holy Trinity Church is the gathered church, meaning large numbers drive in from outside the area midweek. Weddings and funerals fill the roads sometimes blocking access to driveways. The church is also run daily adult events. The weekday children's activities also add further pressure. Grove Road currently absorbs parking from local shops, cafes, the dentist, the pub, and overspill from Springfield Road and St Wilfrid's nursery and primary schools. This development will put the situation beyond breaking point. The noise report assumes relatively quiet children, which is not realistic. In modern early years education, outdoor play is continuous throughout the day, not occasional. Noise from 12 to 24 children would be constant and significantly louder than ordinary residential use. The report does not adequately consider age range. Older children will create more noise. It also ignores the cumulative effect of sound. Each additional sound source rapidly increases the overall noise levels. meaning loudness will escalate quickly, and in turn, children will raise their voices more to be heard. Noise will escape from both ground and first floor playrooms, especially through bifold doors, projecting sound well above and into the garden over the garden walls. This will fundamentally change the acoustic environment for residents in the flats and Springfield Road, where no acoustic fencing is planned. In addition, cleaners arriving early and late plus evening and weekend parenting courses and services, meaning extended hours of disruption. Residents are rightly asking, when will there be any quiet at all? The proposal is clearly an intensive commercial use of a residential setting, further compounded by the noise from frequent collections, including bins and deliveries. Sheffield already suffers from serious air quality problems, and the council has a statutory duty to protect it. Just 120 metres from the proposed nursery, the La Scala air monitoring site recorded average nitrogen dioxide levels nearly 3 times World Health Organization guidelines, and in 5 months, separate months in 2025, they were over 3 times. The Royal College of Paediatricians and Child Healthcare is clear that air pollution causes serious harm during pregnancy, infancy, childhood and adolescence. Placing a nursery in one of the most polluted parts of this area is fundamentally unsafe. The mitigation measures are unworkable. Staggered drop-offs is good on paper but unenforceable in real life. The travel pack has no legal force and is effectively box-ticking. On-site management during operating hours cannot realistically distinguish between nursery users and general public parking across 3 roads. Critically, future operators will not be legally bound to enforce these measures. These proposals offer false reassurance without real-world control. In conclusion, the application would cause permanent loss of residential amenity, severe parking and traffic congestion, significant continuous noise disruption, increased exposure of very young children to dangerous air pollution. The supporting report seriously underestimates real impacts, and the proposed mitigation is unworkable and unenforceable. For these reasons, the residents strongly urge the council to review the application. Okay, thank you.
Our next speakers are for the application, and I'll start with Susan Crowley, please. For 5 minutes, Susan, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not the agent for the planning application, but I have been asked to come and support the proposal for the nursery at the site. And having reviewed the planning application, I have a number of comments, if I may. The officer's report, the applicants are pleased to note, suggests there's no longer an objection to the proposal in principle. And they're also pleased to note that officers consider the proposal would result in the provision of additional childcare in a time of high demand, to quote the officers, to which significant weight must be attached. Additional childcare for children with protected characteristics, again acknowledged by the officers, to which significant weight must be attached. Additional childcare in a sustainable location, again referred to by officers, to which significant weight must be attached. In addition, the proposal would not result in harm to the character of the area, although I accept what local residents are saying in that regard, and they have a position. That's a weighty material consideration. The proposal would not result in harm to residential amenity by way of noise impact, again a weighty material consideration. There would arise no harm to residential amenity by way of pollution, a weighty material consideration. And the biodiversity net gain requirements are not triggered, again a weighty material consideration. Officers object on highway safety grounds, considering that such harm would arise that the benefits of the proposal are significantly and demonstrably outweighed. Officers refer to paragraph 116 of the NPPF in this regard, and in support of their objection they state, and I quote, paragraph 116 of the NPPF makes it clear that development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if they would result in unacceptable impact on highway safety, or the residual cumulative, I do beg your pardon, impacts on the road network would be severe, taking into account all reasonable future scenarios, and I want to stress that point. The objection is that visitors to the proposal will park indiscriminately, I quote, setting down in inappropriate or unsafe locations, which includes mounting on curbs and obstructing the footway for pedestrians, and I quote again, irrespective, and here is the key issue, of the parking restrictions that are in effect along the highway in proximity to the site. In short, the presence of parking restrictions, according to officers, is not a material consideration. In taking this approach, officers have failed to have proper regard to the circumstances surrounding the proposal. Before determining whether they would arise an unacceptable impact on highway safety, the NPPF, again paragraph 116, expects the local authority to weigh all future scenarios in the balance. As such, weight must be given to the prospect of the existing parking restrictions being properly enforced by the local authority, including by way, for example, of the installation of an AMPR camera in the location of the restrictions. Weight must also be given to the effect of introducing additional parking restrictions, including by way of a Section 278 agreement, which could be secured by condition, and the applicant is agreeable to that. And weight should be given to the ability of and directions which can be given to parents or visitors, advising them to park within Millhouses Park, which is located within 2 minutes walk of the property. All of these are relevant material considerations and future scenarios. Irrespective, focusing on other nursery provision within the southwest of the city and looking at recent planning permissions as contained within the local authority's public register for sites which display the characteristics of the current application site, I note that in the case of all bar none that I have looked at, it was determined that traffic and noise impacts of drop-offs and pickups with or without on-site facilities would be tolerable, noting that, and I quote from an officer report, this function is a characteristic of every school, college and nursery across the city and takes place over short periods of time. I have sought but failed to identify what circumstances are particular to the site at Springfield Road that might warrant officers departing from the consistent approach to such development taken elsewhere within the city. And I would encourage members to overturn officer recommendation and grant planning permission, particularly when weighing all future scenarios in the balance, including the proper management of the existing parking restrictions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Susan. Our next speaker is Matthew Gascoigne. Have 5 minutes, Matthew, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Matthew Gascoigne. I'm a chartered engineer, a member of the Institute of Acoustics with over 30 years experience in noise assessment. I've made a further revision to my noise assessment based on a revised external area layout to address the earlier environmental health consultee response. I understand that has overcome the previous concerns and that noise is no longer a material matter for refusal. I will briefly run through the process we have gone through to get to this point. The noise assessment involved the monitoring of noise levels from external play and the measurement of the baseline, ambient and background noise levels without any noise from children. The measurement of children playing included ride-on toys, but it has now been clarified that a rubber-type surfacing will be laid, which will further reduce noise levels. The potential noise from the nursery has been compared with the ambient and background noise levels measured with no noise from children, and it will be much lower. This shows there would be negligible impact on the existing acoustic environment. There was an objection that the noise survey has not been taken in the peak hours or on warmer times. The opposite is true. Taking the baseline at a quiet time makes the assessment more onerous for the nursery. The external play calculation has been amended to cover the revised layout and to consider 32 children outside. Normally there would be 12 to 24 outside, but 32 has been used to stress test the calculation, and it still shows a low noise impact. There were originally comments that the noise from comings and goings wasn't included in the assessment. This has been added and the assessment shows no noise impact. Noise breakout has also been assessed. The issue of doors to external areas being fully open was raised. That has now been included and the results still show low noise impact. plant noise was raised and can be conditioned to be dealt with at the detailed design stage. With regard to the flats to the rear, my main assessment position at the flats has been the first floor level because there is less screening there than at ground floor level. The assessment shows low noise impact at first floor level. Some comments were made about the communal gardens to the flats, and I've now included a receptor in the gardens, in the flats communal garden, and the impact is low at that point as well. Some technical points were raised by the Environmental Health Officer and have been addressed in the latest report, including how the children are assumed to be spread around the external play area, the combination of noise breakout and noise from external play, and the comparison with background noise levels as well as the ambient noise levels. The answer to all these questions have now been accepted by the Environmental Health Officer, so I won't go into the technical aspects in detail. In summary, this is not a quiet area and the noise generated will be low in comparison with existing noise levels. My assessment demonstrates that any increase in noise levels arising from the change of use to a nursery will be insignificant. My conclusion as an independent assessor is that noise generated by the nursery would not result in any demonstrable harm to residential amenity. I'm happy to answer any questions if necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matthew. Our next speaker is Letitia Lang, please.
So I'll not keep you because I'll be revising what we've already gone over. So first and foremostly, we would like to say that Springfield Road is not a retirement village. Several objections describe children as being nuisances to elderly residents, but Springfield Road isn't designated or designed for a retirement village. It is a mixed-age residential area consistent with national planning assumptions that communities should support intergenerational living. Modern planning recognises that children are part of healthy, functioning neighbourhoods and should not be excluded on the basis of age or presence. Obviously, we will go back to the strong public transport links. Springfield Road is a very busy road. It's adjacent to Aberdale Road, which has a frequent bus route. Families use it all the time and many, many vehicles are present. The local supports sustainable travel, fully aligned with local plan and national planning principles, NPPF. The parking concerns are very much overrated. As a parent, I currently use the provision. I can confirm that parking has not been a problem. There is lots of on-street parking and in the surrounding roads. Parents also use the buses and we do have access to a collection and drop-off service, and that is accessible to every parent at the nursery. Additional parking controls could resolve anything, such as, if deemed necessary, yellow lines outside the nursery could be easily added to maintain emergency access, ensure safe drop-offs for disabled children, and prevent nuisance parking. This measure is a standard and it will have a low impact. Significant need for SEN and inclusive early years provisions is very, very much apparent. The current nursery already supports autistic children via Sparkle Sheffield, and demand is significantly high in this area. Right, let's go. We'll go skip past that. Inaccuracies in the report in public commentary. Media reporting suggests the property contains 4 bedrooms. Is factually incorrect. It is a 5-bedroom property. The property will not continue as a family home, but will be fully converted to meet Ofsted regulatory standards for early learning provisions. Misinformation circulating publicly should not influence planning decision making. Importance of the multicultural and inclusive provision. Some objectors have made comments implying the provision should exist only in areas with residents of your own people, which is inappropriate and concerning. Sheffield is a multicultural city, and the local area already includes families of diverse backgrounds, local Black, Brown, Asian, Chinese, and mixed heritage, and other families deserve access to this service. This development provides an inclusive, diverse, and culturally reflective environment. Community values and cooperatives. The nursery operates as a non-for-profit cooperative, reinvesting income into the local community. The project brings local jobs, training, and social values, aligning with the government's stated goals to expand the cooperative economy. The development offers measurable community benefits, which is relevant to the planning under the NPPF and local policy. Meeting and identifying local needs. There is an urgent shortage of a high-quality early learning years provision. In this part of Sheffield, the development means clear local demands include for sane and inclusive places. Supporting the application contributes to the improvement of educational infrastructures and addressing citywide capacity pressures. Conclusion. The Springfield Road development is practical, inclusive, sustainable, community beneficial. It is also needed and aligns with the local national planning policy. Misconceptions about children, disability, culture, diversity, and parking should not prevent approval of a development that brings clear educational, social, and community values to Sheffield.
Thank you, Richard. You've had 5 minutes now. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Sasha Gohar. You, Mayor? Please. You have 5 minutes, Sasha. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Sasha Gohar. I'm speaking on behalf of the Carers for Kin, a community-based community benefit society that has helped supported children and young people growing up in kinship care in the area and stay for some time. I myself am a kinship carer and the son of my deceased sister who is waiting on the list to attend proposed Springfield Road provision. Kinship carers are grandparents, aunts, uncles, siblings, other relatives, friends who step in to raise children and parents have died or seriously ill or in prison or unable to care for due to other complex circumstances. These are families built with love, duty, resilience, stepping up moments in crisis. Too often they are left without structured support they need. There is a community of interest in the area, a great need. What is proposed of public benefit. The proposed cooperative is not a profit nursery, wraparound, and family support provision and is provided in a unique specialist inclusive service for kinship families in the area, which currently does not exist anywhere locally. Many of the children we support have experienced great trauma, bereavement, loss, neglect, high proportion, have special educational needs, disabilities, and require environments that are not only nurturing but expertly equipment, which meet complex emotional development needs. Mainstream nurseries and childcare settings, even with the best intentions, often lack capacity, specialist training, therapeutic support, and the children that are required to thrive. The team leading this table has 3 decades of professional experience working with traumatized children, families. The depth of expertise cannot be easily replicated anywhere else in the city. The proposal would therefore fulfill a critical gap in provision, offering trauma-informed early years around wraparound support, family outreach services, support from Sheffield's most marginalized, stigmatized families, including areas where perceived affluence can disadvantage and suffering. The Council's childcare sufficiency assessments or family support strategies also highlight significant shortfalls in childcare setting inclusion and family support, including kinship care capacity citywide. The proposal responds directly to those insufficiencies by increasing inclusive special childcare places, providing wraparound therapeutic support for kinship families, reducing the need for families to travel outside of the area, find provision. There are material planning considerations because they relate to the social role of planning, supporting strong, inclusive, and healthy communities, and NPPF, paragraphs 8 and 93. Land use and service accessibility, ensuring that essential community infrastructure is available within local neighbourhood. Public interest outcomes, helping Sheffield City Council meet its statutory duties under the Childcare Act 2006, Equality Act 2010, and Children and Families Act 2014 to secure sufficient inclusive early years provision. The UK government has made a manifesto commitment to double size the cooperative and mutual sector, the provision in its Community Benefit Society. Under the Children Act 1989, local authorities have a general duty to safeguard and promote the welfare of all children in the area. Section 70 requires LAs, local authorities, provide a range and level of services inappropriate for children in need. This means that when a child is living in a kinship, cares and demands a child in need, the LAs must act to support these children. Since October 2024, the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill has progressed, includes new duties. Kinship care, for example, new duties for LAs to publish up-to-date accessible information, a kinship local offer about services for kinship care children's. This provision proposed should be part of the kinship local offer, and proposed development will be adding value to it. It will support the duty placed on local authorities, again published in October 2024, to promote the educational equipment with the children living kinship care via new sections in the Children Act. The importance of inclusion, equality cannot be ignored. The proposal exemplifies that Equality Act 2010 calls for advancement of equality of opportunity. Children in kinship care families, these families are often stigmatized, marginalized. The proposal will deliver a genuinely anti-discriminatory and inclusive environment, representation belonging for children who are too often unseen, misunderstood, or mainstream settings. To deny permission for provision design precisely include most excluded would be overlooked one of the most powerful expressions, public benefit of the planning. You may ask why this matters. Well, kinship families are a vital part of the family's social fabric in Sheffield. They step up when the system cannot, often at great personal cost. They should not have to fight for inclusive services, but recognize the children's needs. This proposal would offer those families, which includes ourselves, some already using the current child wellbeing provision and others waiting to desperate need and waiting list of a lifeline. It is precisely kind of a community-based specialist provision in Sheffield. This is not a proposal to the planning committee should be blocked. It is one of the cities should be championed because it embodies Sheffield's values of compassion, fairness, and inclusion. Chair and members, this proposal is not just about building, it is about children who have already endured more than most and families who have stepped up to give them love, stability, and a future. The modest physical impacts of the development...
Thank you, Sasha. You've had 5 minutes now.
Thank you.
Very much. Our next speaker is Salvatore Diagla. Aquilia.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to speak in support of the nursery application on Springfield Road. I truly believe this proposal will be a great benefit to the Millhouses community and makes good planning sense. I know there's been concerns raised about parking, drop-offs, safety and noise, but I don't believe these are strong reasons to refuse the application. The report mentions an increase in parking demand and the lack of a formal drop-off area, but nurseries simply don't operate like schools. From my experience working in other nurseries across the city, children arrive gradually throughout the morning and are collected in the same way during the afternoon, not all at once. Many families live locally and either walk, use buggies or take public transport. That means the overall traffic impact is minimal and spread throughout the day. Children and their voices are part of everyday community life and should be celebrated, not seen as a nuisance. In fact, the proposal includes an acoustic barrier along the boundary of the rear garden to manage the sound appropriately. Rather than causing issues, this nursery will bring real positives. Safe and reliable childcare close to home, new jobs for local people, and a vibrant daytime presence when the pub is quiet. It's a great example of how different uses can complement each other. This proposal also fits perfectly with planning objectives. It makes efficient use of existing land, supports local families, and reduces the need for long car journeys. With sensible management, parking can be handled safely and responsibly, as it is at other nurseries across the city. So I would encourage the committee to look at the bigger picture here, the community benefits, the sustainable location, and the small and manageable impact on traffic. This nursery will be an asset to mill houses, and I really do hope you'll support the application. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another person, but they're not here. So Abby is going to read out, and it's from last. Well, you pronounce it.
Thank you, Chair. This is a statement from, I believe it's Lisa D'Souza, and she's the founder and CEO of Sparkle Sheffield. For more than 15 years, Sparkle Sheffield, an award-winning charity, has been supporting autistic children, young people and their families across Sheffield, including here in mill houses. Nethersedge, Cartnell and the wider southwest of the city. We are an autistic person and parent/carer-led community organisation working citywide to provide leisure and respite services, advocacy, training and peer support for children and families navigating autism and co-occurring conditions such as ADHD, anxiety, learning disabilities and sensory processing differences. Our ethos is rooted in inclusion, equality and lived experience. We exist to make Sheffield a place where neurodiverse children and young people are understood, supported, included and celebrated, not left behind. The SEND population and the local gap in provision. Through our direct work in this area, we know there is a sizable SEND population of children and young people living in and around mill houses, Cartnell, Abbeydale and Ecclesall. In addition, there are working in and visiting the area too other families with children who have SEND, whom too require inclusion and support. However, specialist childcare, early years provision and family support services for autistic and other SEND children in this part of Sheffield are scarce. Families repeatedly tell us, and as we know from our own work in the area, they are unable to find appropriate places locally, often being told that settings are full and cannot accommodate their child's needs or lack the staff training and expertise to provide consistent support. As a result, families are forced to travel across the city and in some cases out of Sheffield to find provision that's suitable. This situation is not sustainable. It represents a clear childcare SEND and family support insufficiency, one that the council and the local authority are both legally obligated and politically committed to address under the Childcare Act 2006, which requires the local authority to secure sufficient childcare for all working parents, including those of disabled children. The Children and Families Act 2014, which obligates councils to ensure that children with SEND can access appropriate early years provision locally, and the Equality Act 2010, which imposes the public sector equality duty to eliminate discrimination, advance equality of opportunity and foster good relations between different groups. The Springfield Road proposal speaks directly to these duties and to the Council's own stated priorities on inclusion, early intervention and community wellbeing. The vital importance of the proposed service, the proposed nursery and family support service offers something Sheffield currently lacks: a specialist, holistic, inclusive, cooperative environment built by professionals with decades of experience working with autistic, neurodivergent and SEND children and their families, including those children requiring discrete forms of support too, whom we also partner in working to support. It will provide expert-led, trauma-informed and neuro-affirming early years education, specialist wraparound care for children who might otherwise be excluded or turned away, and practical and emotional family support for parents and carers trying to navigate complex SEND systems. This is not just another nursery, it is a lifeline for families who have been unable to access or sustain placements elsewhere. It will give local children who have historically been misunderstood or excluded a chance to belong, to learn and to thrive close to home. A service of this calibre and ethos is vital not only for local families but for Sheffield's citywide SEND strategy. It strengthens the continuum of provision and reduces pressure on already stretched specialist and out-of-area placements. We are aware that council personnel have advised some supporters not to refer to public benefit, sufficiency or need, suggesting that these are not material planning considerations. With respect, Sparkle Sheffield holds a different and well-founded view.
That's it, thank you. That's 5 minutes, thanks, Abby. Chris, would you like to respond?
Chair, there are a significant number of speakers and many points raised, but a lot of those have already been made within the report, so I'm not going to cover many of them. Just a few things that, and also because of the number of speakers, it cuts across a couple of disciplines, so I might jump about a little bit, so apologies for that. There's reference from the first speaker about the impact on the character of the area, and that reference signage. I just wanted to make clear to members that there is no signage under consideration as part of this application. Any signage that would follow a grant of planning permission would either require advertisement consent and would therefore be subject to a separate application, or could potentially be deemed consent in a similar way to permitted development exists for works to properties. So, simple, long way of saying signage isn't up for discussion as part of this application, Chair. There was reference to air quality. I just wanted to make clear that there wasn't an air quality assessment as part of the application because the numbers of movements don't reach the threshold where that becomes a necessity. Just for context, the threshold is 60 movements per hour. So there wasn't a formal assessment in that regard. We are very aware of air quality problems along the Aberdale Road corridor, but this location is set 100 metres, a couple hundred metres or so up from the corridor, and is therefore less of a concern in that regard. There was reference to, I'm paraphrasing somewhat because I was trying to write it all down as people were speaking, but there's reference to many other nurseries, many other schools existing in similar locations where a conclusion has been reached that this is a kind of a typical situation with schools and shouldn't be a barrier to permission being granted. This is with reference to parking demand, traffic considerations. And I think all I would say there, Chair, is every case is dealt with on its individual merits. Every case has different circumstances. Those may have been in areas that aren't so close, for example, to a signalised junction that is an important route through an area such as Springfield Road is. Many comments, particularly towards the end, referred to the benefits that the facility, either in its current form or in its future form, would offer to particular groups of society identified as people with protected characteristics in many cases, or disadvantaged persons for other reasons. And that's set out, Chair, in the report under the heading of Public Sector Equality Duty, and I don't think I need to add any more to that. So I think the other thing, I'm also not going to comment on the noise considerations because I suspect that might come out in questioning. Just a couple of things that I thought, Mark, if you wouldn't mind, might want to address. So there was a comment that the existing on-site, sorry, the proposed on-site space for the minibus provision would require reversing into or out of the site. So if Mark wouldn't mind commenting on that, please. And also whether in the circumstances it would be reasonable to look through a 278 agreement, section 278 agreement, to provide double yellow lines, as was suggested, outside the site frontage. My own view on that is that that would disperse the parking elsewhere if the facility was allowed, and potentially cause more difficulty on other streets. But I wonder if Mark could just answer those 2 points, please.
Yes, Chair. Unfortunately, there isn't sufficient space within the site for a minibus to be able to turn, so it would involve either reversing into the site from the main road or reversing out into the main road. And it is a very busy road during the peak periods, and a quite narrow road as well, with the which is why there are double yellow lines down the opposite side of the road all the way to the junction. With providing new double yellow lines, that would require, I mean, a condition could in theory be attached, but it would be to promote a traffic regulation order, which in itself invites objections, and if those objections can't be overturned, then the traffic regulation order would fail and we couldn't promote double yellow lines. And as Chris has alluded to, I think that the parking there, and it was a very senior colleague of mine who undertook the analysis of this planning application and visited the site numerous occasions, different times of the day. They felt that there was overspill parking from residents and parking from the district shopping centre that happens on Springfield Road currently, which is causing problems with finding spaces. I appreciate the efforts that have been made within the submission to diminish demand to drive to and from the site, different measures that are contained there, but as the report says, and as my colleague felt, expecting a 26% modal split cars as opposed to a national average of 60 to 70% does seem optimistic, despite those really good intentions of trying to reduce car trips. So I think it's just a case of, in this location, it is felt that the mention was also made of enforcing double yellow lines and maybe having camera technology to help with that enforcement. It's all a drag on resources, and whilst wardens might blitz that area once a month maybe, if there's a continued problem with parking restrictions being ignored, there are still a lot of weeks there where people, if it's raining like it has been today, will be tempted to perhaps, I suggest, nipping in to pick my kid up. And it's that indiscriminate nature, that parking on such a busy street instead of safe off-street facilities that, in this instance, causes that's the reason for the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Right, we'll move to members' questions. I have Glynis first, followed by Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, I'd just like to go to page 86. I know when we went round viewing the property, I did ask at the time whether we knew how many children would be in each day, because there is a strict ratio of how many adults have to be there to look after children. And especially for under twos, you need a bigger ratio of adult care. And if you're putting in SEND provision, you're going to need more care. So when you're looking at this, you're probably thinking you're going to have 10 or 12 adult carers there all the time without knowing how many children you have in each day. Did you get any joy on asking how many people you're going to have in?
Chair, I think the report answers that question in that the maximum number of children on site at any one time would be 55 with 12 adults. And Chair, I don't know the ratio of adult to child that's necessary for the facility, because as has been mentioned, it probably varies from setting to setting, and taking account of other factors such as special needs. But the information here is taken from what the applicant has provided, which doesn't seem unusual or remarkable. And so we've taken that as being the appropriate ratio that would be needed to cater for 55 children. So it will be 55 children and 12 adults, is our understanding.
Yeah, and can I just say, the bit about SEND provision seems to have come later. Is this going to be, do we know whether it be completely SEND provision or is it mixed?
Chair, it's my understanding that it would be mixed. What I would say at this point is that that's effectively up to the operator in terms of how our nursery operator operates the facility. And some nurseries will have the ability to take more SEND children than others. Some operators will have a specialism, if you like, in catering for those needs, some less so. But I would expect that all nurseries have to provide provision, would be my understanding or assumption. What I would also say is what we're granting permission for is a nursery, and that could change over time. So within a matter of months or whatever, even if intentions are met, that could change after a few months, and there could be very minimal SEND provision and greater at a nursery up the road. And that's just a point that's worth making, Chair, in terms of how much weight really should be given to that.
Mike?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chris, for the presentation, and to the members of the public who've come along to have their say on this application. If we leave aside the other possible sticking points, and in your presentation, Chris, you accept now that noise is not the big issue that it was a couple of months ago, due to mitigation measures being put in. And if we go to the parking and highways issues, which is the principal reason for turning down this application, are there any measures that we could condition that would make this location sufficiently safe for members to approve the application? I noticed one of the speakers speaking in favour mentioned a section 278 agreement. I'm not clear as a layperson what that relates to, but they also suggested putting up ANPR cameras. If the applicant paid for that, would that be acceptable and a means to support better behaviour on the highway and in relation to parking? The other thing was on the modal split. Our highways officer said that compared to the national average, the applicant was being optimistic about the ratio of people bringing their children on foot or by buggy compared to those who would bring their children and infants by car. But I just wondered if we've already got parts of Sheffield where actually it is more in line with what the applicant proposes, and that we do have districts in Sheffield where the majority of people are taking their children to nursery on foot, in prams and buggies and so forth.
Chair, I think these might go to Mark, I'm afraid, but I would expect that we've not necessarily got the information that you just asked for right at the end there in terms of split around the city. And I think just from our point of view, trying to look at it in the round, we have looked at whether and given consideration to whether the measures that were put forward by the applicant around things like staggered opening times and possibly things like travel plan proposals or those kind of things could resolve the problem. And alongside things like further greater enforcement or further measures to limit parking provision, but we've questioned whether that is actually practicable and reasonable to be able to sort of enforce that on a constant basis. And overall we have felt that whilst applaud the applicant for the kind of the measures they're putting forward, and I think we'd all like to see that happen. Just think that realistically it's unlikely to happen, given that as some of the people objecting to the proposals mentioned, that a lot of the support comes from quite a wide area, and I think that's kind of something to bear in mind too. But if Mark wouldn't mind answering the specifics.
Chair, I mean, we could have a condition requiring a ANPR camera, but they still need to be monitored and viewed by members of the council, and then enforcement action taken, which is, the funding would be quite prohibitive, I feel. I mean, if we were to go down that route, somebody who is fly parking, yeah, okay, you've got the registration, you could follow that up, but it is a very time-consuming exercise. So there would be the cost of the camera, and I don't know what that would be, and then there would be quite an extensive commuted sum to cover staff costs to actually observe, monitor, take the requisite action, and it just seems cost prohibitive for the scale of the development. I can't think of any other ANPR cameras outside nurseries to deal with. I mean, if it's not a problem and it's sustainable, then you shouldn't be looking at having cameras. That suggests to me that it'd be great to have a nursery in this location, but it perhaps isn't quite as sustainable as we would hope. And the fact that the road is so narrow, and we've got WL lines down one side to try and maintain free flow traffic conditions, if those parking restrictions are flouted, then it will cause problems with free flow traffic conditions, a very busy junction in peak periods. And I think staggering arrivals is probably quite workable, but my experience of a kid in one of these day nurseries was it's more in the evening where parents you can be caught in traffic if it's a long distance to the nursery. I don't think staggering collections is particularly workable. And it was my experience that when I was using one of these facilities, dropping off in the morning is quite easy, and you can time that to avoid peaks and whatnot. In the evening, depending on what activities are taking place inside, the child might not be ready to leave bang on the dot when you arrive, and the carers aren't going to be sure what time you arrive. So the mechanics of it starts to become a bit more sort of messy in the evening, is my experience. Are parked indiscriminately for longer periods, particularly in the evening peak, then I feel that's where the safety issues could develop, and those are the concerns.
Vicky?
Thank you, Chair. Just in respect to the ANPR camera suggestion, in terms of parking restrictions and how they're enforced, if it's outside of a bus lane, it can only be enforced by a civil enforcement officer. So parking bus lanes can be enforced by camera and a notice sent later. Obviously, there could be a camera there which is monitored, and then enforcement officer is then dispatched to deal with somebody. But obviously, there'd be a delay there associated with that.
So, as I just wanted to clarify that an ANPR camera would not be a way of enforcing the yellow lines. So that can only be done in terms of parking in a bus lane. Thank you.
Part of Mike's question was, what is section 278? So could someone answer that, please?
Chair, it's just a legal agreement under the Highways Act, which enables improvement works in the public highway by a third party. So if any physical alterations were required of the highway to facilitate this development, it would just be the legal means of securing those works.
Thanks, Mark. My next one is Henry, followed by Mary and Cliff.
Thank you, Chair. There's been some discussion of this, modal split in terms of car drop-offs versus pedestrian. And one of the figures we've been given is that 4 of the objectors were actually within a walking distance of the facility. But if you're looking for a nursery facility, I wouldn't look at pending planning applications and walking around the area. It seems we should have a number of how many households live within a 5-minute walking distance or a 10-minute walking distance. Now, as part of a traffic assessment, do we look at people who would be walking to this area but are currently driving to another nursery further away because they have to? Nurseries, it's a very small one, they're low order. It seems to me if they're dotted around, that increases the likelihood that people will be able to use walking as a mode to get there. And certainly the nursery I use is in a residential area, it's very near my house, and the majority of parents would want to walk there as a matter of choice. So do we not have any figures on how many households are within walking distance of the proposed site?
Chair, we don't have that information. And the reference to 4 objectors living in walking distance came from one of the objectors' own kind of assessment of the. We haven't kind of checked that, verified that or anything. So yeah, I mean, it's possible that people are driving to. I don't know if Mark wants to comment on this as well, but it's possible that people are driving currently to a facility elsewhere that they could perhaps switch to walking to come to this one. I think that's possible, and I suppose that happens all the time with when new facilities are provided somewhere. I think you kind of have to make assumptions about people's behaviour to some extent, and the reason we tend to fall back on. And that's the reason we tend to fall back on the kind of the national data, unless it's an active facility providing that service in that location, and you can actually survey it and measure it and everything else. Then you really are kind of just trying to make predictions on how people will behave, which is always quite difficult. And again, that's why we fall back on assessment of similar facilities in similar locations, and that suggests that it's between 60 and 70 people that drive, 70% of people that drive. But yeah, of course, some will walk, some will come by bike, some will come by public transport, and the same goes for staff. But as I said, we rely on that kind of general data.
It would have been nice to have better data on the catchment area for this particular facility. Similarly, in terms of staggered drop-offs, we use staggered drop-offs at our nursery. And the discussion so far has framed it as something that is done by a facility to parents, and that's just not how it works. It's something that allows parents some flexibility. And the change in funding for nursery places has also affected that, because more people want to shorten their day at nursery now so they can spread their 3 hours more evenly throughout the year. And we pick up and drop off early and late because that's how our work works. And there's never been any suggestion from the nursery that you have to pick up at this time. You can pick up between this hour and this hour. You have to pay for it. And again, it would be good to get some comparative data on other facilities as to how their staggered drop-off and pick-up works to spread it out. Because it is a tiny number compared to a primary school, the number of people we're talking about. and the drop-off period is very, very short. It's minutes.
Mary?
Yeah, just a question about, because it was been raised about the ratio of children to adults, and some of those children will be more disabled than others maybe. Isn't that a matter for the children's services to give a licence on that, on those grounds, rather than, it's not a planning consideration, is it? So that really doesn't apply.
That's correct.
Yeah, and similarly, you know, in terms of there's facilities, nurseries across the city, and some of them in very, very busy places on either on residential roads or on busy roads where people have to park on residential roads. I'm not sure why you would object to this facility on those grounds when it's part and parcel of life in Sheffield.
I think, Chair, we accept that. We accept that nurseries are in busy locations. But as I said, there is different context for every site. Not every site is the same. Very few sites are the same, if any. And we've taken the view that on this particular site, the traffic concerns are so significant that we couldn't support it. I don't know if Matt wants to elaborate on that at all, but that is the view that we've come to. And I appreciate that there are other material considerations that could be considered to outweigh those, but on this occasion, we've felt that the highway concerns are so significant, so sufficient to not follow that route on this occasion.
Cliff, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm concerned about the parking situation, but something that concerns me even more is where parents have to cross the road with children at a very busy road. And I mean, could you comment on that? I mean, am I sort of imagining something, or you know, it just strikes me as something that is actually quite undesirable. You've got a busy road, and you've got parents with children crossing this road. It just seems, you know, something's going to happen at some time.
The concern is generally about the movement of it's the vehicle, the narrowness of the carriageway, the presence of parked vehicles, people pulling out, pulling in alongside a very busy route, sometimes with queuing going up from the junction by some distance, opening car doors, getting children in and out. Yes, ideally people would do that on the pavement side, but it's not always the case that you're parked on the your child is immediately behind you and you're parking on the same side and getting using the same doors. To get them out, you often have to kind of walk around the vehicle, etc. Yes, if they're parked on the other side of the road and having to cross the road, that is also a concern. And so, yeah, from an officer point of view, we would agree that is a concern. I don't know if Mark wants to add more.
Chair, if most of the pedestrian movements using public transport and some of the other measures that have been suggested, they would probably be approaching from Aberdeen Road direction, which does at that junction, there are controlled push-button crossings for pedestrians, and the double yellow lines are on the opposite side of the road, so unless they're being violated, the parking should be on the same side of the road as the actual proposed nursery. But that doesn't, I mean, kids are normally in if people are arriving by car, probably would be a high proportion using the seats that you strap into a car, so there's a lot of strapping kids in and out of seats and moving around. So any cars undertaking those activities are going to be causing an obstruction to free flow traffic conditions probably for a period of time.
Richard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I guess my concern is one of the procedure going forward. The suggestion or the recommendation from the officers is refusal. If that is agreed, I assume that the applicant could go to appeal. If they go to appeal and if they win, is there a chance at that point for the inspector to add conditions? Because unless I'm missing it, there's very few, if any, conditions in the report. And what happens then? Do we miss the boat? For example, it talks about operating on an ad hoc basis at weekends. Now, if this was normally, I'm thinking about other facilities, shops, if we were going for a recommendation for approval, we would probably have conditions about hours of operation. If the refusal goes through the appeal, etc., do we miss the boat on that?
Chair, no, if with any refusal of permission, when that's appealed, the inspector, if they allow the appeal and grant planning permission, they have the opportunity to impose conditions. They also invite the authority, when responding to that appeal, to identify a list of conditions that they would like to see appended in the event that the appeal was allowed.
Members' comments?
Thanks. I must admit, I'm a bit confused by the assertion that parents will only drive their children to a nursery when it's potentially right next to Abbeydale Road, which has got a bus stop within a few minutes. My question was similar to Richard's, actually, quite a simple question, just that if the committee are minded to approve this application today, there isn't a list of conditions. So how would we go about that? Would we have to defer so that conditions could then be created?
Chair, it's in the event of the recommendation being overturned and members resolving to grant permission, then it's quite normal for for conditions that would have otherwise been imposed to be agreed between the chair and officers as a delegated matter rather than coming back to committee.
Mark, is it a question or a comment? Right.
Of this nursery, we need nurseries, you know, but has enough thought been put into by the proposers of where this nursery is? The nursery is fantastic, but I'm familiar with this road crossing. I used to buy curries from the takeaway there, and I had a very good friend who lived on Springfield Road who we visited a lot. And I've personally witnessed near accidents and incidents from people crossing on the actual button-controlled crossing because the junction is so busy that people keep trying to jump the lights. The nursery right next to this junction, really, I think they should have chosen another quieter location for the nursery. So I'm inclined to go with the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Mary?
Thank you, yeah, sorry. Well, I'm disappointed in the recommendation. There's a high demand for this kind of facility across Sheffield, particularly in the southwest where there's a high number of SEND children. So, you know, demand is absolutely there, demand is rising, so we do need this kind of facility. I know the nature of work these days is that people do work staggered times, and often you can be flexible in the hours that you choose. So people wouldn't be coming all at once or to collect the children, or coming all at once to drop the children off. So I think, you know, on that level, I don't think the recommendation stands up really. I was a trustee at Amy's house, which was provided respite care for people with young children with disabilities, this kind of disabilities, and it was a really highly regarded service. They had staggered times. People came at different times of the day and the evening, in the morning and the evening, and they had a minibus to collect people, and it worked perfectly perfectly well, operated perfectly well, and it was moved from one setting to another depending on the circumstances that we were in at the time, and never any issue. So I'll be voting against the recommendation.
Henry?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, like Councillor Lee, I think we absolutely have a need for this sort of provision. Also want to see us building a society where we normalise walking to school, and that starts with walking to nursery, and that means having them small and spread out across the city, often in residential areas. And I think it's unfair to pin the traffic woes of Springfield Road and Abbeydale Road and the surrounding area, where we've got traffic problems all across Sheffield. And I don't think a small increase in provision at an existing nursery should have to shoulder the blame for those traffic issues. So I'll also be going against the officer recommendations in support of the facility. Thank you, Chair.
Mike?
Thank you, Chair. I don't think anyone around in this room would doubt that there is a need for this provision, and particularly one that can cater for young children with special educational needs, and that is absolutely to be commended. I'm also minded to go with the officer view that mitigation can effectively be put in to reduce the worst effects of children's noise. Perhaps because I became a dad myself many years ago, the sound of children laughing and playing outside ceased to be any kind of irritation, really. Is that a function of growing old, or is it just the changes we go through as adults? I don't know, because clearly some people continue to find it an irritation no matter what age they get to. But I come back to this point about the parking here at this site. We have an expansion of use here. I gather it started off as a child-minding service, and it's now become a nursery, and clearly wants to expand because the need's there. But it's unusual for highways officers, and we've seen this with so many other applications where members have actually been quite surprised that there aren't the highways concerns about a development going on at a place, but so with this facility being where it is at Springfield Road, close to the junction with the very busy Abbeydale Road, I'm minded to vote with the officer recommendation on the lines that Mark Whittaker has set out.
Marianne?
Thank you, Chair. I'm also disappointed by the recommendation. I think a few points really, given the proximity of the pub and the cafe and the bakery and lots of other amenities on Abbeydale Road within 2 minutes walk. This is possibly not a residential area, and pretty good for local businesses in the community, I would say. It's also noted the officers have no objections in principle, and also, it aligns with local and national objectives. The council's own children's commissioning team have said it will be a welcome addition to the area. The applicant has mitigated the potential noise disturbance, and obviously officers are now satisfied with that. The reason for refusal with the on-traffic grounds being too significant, it does seem that with other applications, we've often heard that traffic impacts, are tolerable, and that's not a reason to reject. It does seem inconsistent approach with this case, so for that reason, I won't be voting with the officer recommendation.
Janet?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm really familiar with that area. In fact, I was given a talk last week, an afternoon last week at the church there, at which people were profusely apologising, arriving sort of 20 minutes late because they couldn't get parked. It was absolutely chaotic around Millhouses Lane, Springfield Road, and this was at a sort of comparatively, quiet time of day. I think that perhaps, the idea of parents coming on public transport is rather over-optimistic. I think that with the best intentions, working parents who are in a rush tend to just, drop off on their way to work, which may not be local to there. People pick nurseries because they are en route, or nearer to their workplace as opposed to not necessarily nearer to where they actually live. And it concerns me that there will be a very significant highways impact here, which just cannot be really sufficiently controlled, that there will be no way of really doing much about it once it's there. We're all familiar with what happens at the moment outside nursery schools, where, at the end of a session when people all pile in and schools try very hard to ask parents to park sensibly and legally, and they just will not. And the cost of and the viability of actually policing and monitoring and enforcing that, as we know throughout the city, is just doesn't happen. It relies on people behaving considerately, and when people are in a rush, they just don't. I have concerns about safety round there, and so I will be agreeing with the officer's recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Cliff?
Yeah, I mean, I think human safety is key here. I have concerns about the turning of the minibus. They're not easy vehicles to do 3-point turns, particularly when you've got other people coming and going to a building. If it was in a slightly different location, just round the road, the corner on Grove Road, it would be a very different story, I think. And, I accept that we need these facilities, and I just wish it was in a different location, that was all, and so I'll be going with the officer's recommendation.
Anyone else? Right, we'll move to a vote. By show of hands, for the officer's recommendation first, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Thank you. Against the officers? 1, 2, 3, 4. Abstentions? No. Passed. Yeah. Thank you, that is passed. Thank you very much. Would members like to take a comfort break?
I want to just clarify
Yeah. Number 23/03/837/FUL. Land to the rear of 496 Loxley Road, Stannington, S6 6RS. Andrew, could you present your report, please?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Just a small thing to mention there, the site's in Loxley rather than Stannington, Chairs. So the site itself is number 496 Loxley Road. So that's a large detached house shown in the centre of this slide. It's set behind the main Loxley Road street frontage, with access being off a private drive. The main part of the site consists of a large grassed area which slopes up to the site's rear boundary. As can be seen, the site is located in a predominantly residential area with housing neighbouring the site on all sides. It's relatively well positioned in relation to local facilities. We've got some trees located around the edges. Two of the trees in the neighbouring gardens are protected by preservation orders. The site also includes some of the land to the front of 496 with regards to its existing private drive and a detached garage belonging to the other house that forms part of this application, which is number 494, which is on the site frontage. 496 Loxley Road is an extremely large property for a single house. As can be seen in the photo, it's wide and tall, being 3 stories at the front and is detached. It stands prominently on elevated ground, which is set back approximately 20 metres from Loxley Road. Steep gradient is one of the main site characteristics and represents one of the main challenges when it comes to developing the site. This has proven to be the case previously with a number of historical applications and appeals having been refused due to shortcomings with the proposed access. This is a photo of the main part of the site. As can be seen, it's mostly open and grassed, with land levels continuing to rise at a slightly reduced gradient on that top part of the site. The trees that are located near to the north-west boundary are visible on the photo, as is one of the neighbouring houses, 10 Keswick Road, which is located side onto the site and is visible on the upper right of the photo. The application is seeking full permission to carry out development of 3 new detached houses in the upper part of the site. Another important part of the proposal involves the extension of and the reprofiling of the private drive that serves the site. The ground levels will be altered and a bend inserted so that it achieves a maximum gradient of 1 in 12. The existing garage belonging to 494 is currently in the path for the proposed driveway realignment, and so it's proposed to demolish it, reconstruct a replacement double garage in a new location on the western side boundary of the site. The proposed houses would all be of contemporary design and identical to one another. The houses would be dug into the hillside so as to be split level, with 3 floors of accommodation on the front, reducing to single storey at the rear. The plans have been amended during the course of the application being considered, which has resulted in the removal of a full storey height of all 3 dwellings. This slide shows a colour representation of the proposed houses. The houses are intended to be constructed in natural stone to the front, artificial stone on the side and on the rear elevations. As can be seen, the roofs would be flat. All windows and doors would be grey and black UPVC. This is the floor plans for the proposed houses. They would each have 5 bedrooms, a side terrace, external steps and internal lifts. The lower ground floor to the front would contain double garages, storage, potentially leisure areas. 16 objections have been received from local residents and 1 from Bradfield Parish Council. Some of those objections were based upon the original plans, which proposed houses that were 4 storeys to the front and 2 storeys to the rear. In terms of the objections, the main concerns include the impact of the development on trees, including the TPO trees off the site, loss of ecological habitat, highway safety, taking on board the previous refusals and appeals, harm to the character and appearance of the area and to the amenity of neighbouring residents. A non-planning related issue relates to concerns about the impact on the stability of neighbouring land and property as a result of the excavation work that is proposed. For the 8 representations in support, the main reasons include the need and the demand for housing in the local area, the improvement that would be made to the appearance of the site with much of it vacant and underused previously. It was also felt that the site would make more effective use of land within the urban fabric of the city in order to help with alleviating pressures on the green belt. The committee report summarises the assessment of the proposal that's been carried out by officers. The report explains that the site is located in a UDP housing area where residential development is the preferred use. Additionally, the council does not currently have a 5-year housing land supply, meaning that the tilted balance is engaged that is set out within national policy. In those circumstances, permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. A significant amount of weight is afforded to the benefits of the development from a housing delivery perspective. The site is also regarded as being in a suitable and sustainable location for housing development. The impacts of the development would be relatively self-contained given the location, which is set behind 496 and represents a form of infill development. So acknowledge that previous applications and appeals have failed due to concerns about the gradient of the access and the potential impact upon highway safety of the classified Loxley Road. However, that issue has been remedied to highway satisfaction, with the proposal including plans to carry out excavation and land reprofiling works to remodel the private drive. The proposed maximum gradient of 1 in 12 is commonplace for all new developments and is so seen as acceptable by highways to overcome the previous refusals. Highways have, however, requested a series of conditions, including one to ensure that the supporting retaining walls and structures serving the private road are structurally sound. In amenity terms, the relationship with neighbouring properties is considered to be acceptable, taking into account the separation distances, the angles of orientation, and the fact that the new houses will be dug into the hillside, so that they're only single storey to the rear. Sorry, I was expecting one more slide to include tree protection plan. I'll just have to talk about that in the absence of it being on this version of the presentation. Yeah, we have looked into those impacts. There is a tree protection plan that's been submitted with the application. That shows that the plans have evolved during the course of the application being considered in order to remove some of the trees further away from those of high value, which include category B trees and the TPO trees, which are off the site. Root protection areas have been factored in as well. There will be some vegetation which would be lost as a result of the development and the excavation works. However, that would be all the lower value category C works, category C trees, and furthermore, landscaping and ecology habitat provisions are proposed to be secured by condition. So overall, it's considered that the tilted balance weighs in favour of the application being granted, and approval is recommended. I'll just quickly summarise the supplementary report before concluding the presentation. So corrections being issued regarding just in a few places the report mixes up 494 Loxley Road with 496. So 496, they're both in the application site, but we've got 496, which is in the central part of the site, which is a very large dwelling that we saw on one of the photos. 496 is the one on the Loxley Road frontage. As well as that, we've got a recommendation to add 2 further conditions, and that is just to require a sample panel of the stonework for the houses and to secure large-scale details relating to the other external facing materials. And that includes everything from window frames and surrounds, just so we can have suitable specifications and images supplied to us and sample options to confirm which ones would be of sufficiently high standard in order for us to agree to those being included. So at that point, I will conclude the presentation and hand back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. We have 2 speakers on this application. The first speaker, Lynette Johnson, please. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say that my heart sank when I saw yet another application for this site, because I'd hoped that after 25 years of fighting applications on that site, that the applicant might have retired. I'd just like to say that the site has got a long and checkered planning history, going back, as I said, 25 years for residential development on this paddock, and it's been consistently refused by both Sheffield City Council and the Planning Inspectorate, mainly on the grounds that it was a greenfield site. This is still the case. It's still a greenfield site. It's
designation has never been altered or changed. So just a few points from the officer report. Because the tilted balance has been applied, this application doesn't actually meet some of the criteria under the tilted balance, in the MPPF, to do with housing mix. There are no affordable homes proposed on this site. Instead, there's a need for affordable homes, but instead we have 3 large 5-bedroom properties with wine cellars, gyms and cinema rooms. So I don't think it fully fulfills that part of the criteria. Under the SCC Core Strategy 26, it states there in the officer report that the site falls significantly below the density required for housing on a site of that size, and that again is contrary to Sheffield City Council's policy. Another point there is that in the officer's report it said on page 8 it was of the then report that this application would be in general accordance with Sheffield City Council and government policies, so therefore it's not totally in accordance with those policies. Bin lorries would be unable to access without reversing down into Loxley Road, so residents will have to take their bins down to the main road. And there's now, in this application, significant excavation and the need for retaining structures. Although I couldn't find anywhere in the report where it says how many lorry loads of spoil, so therefore how many lorries, which would also, I presume, have to reverse down into Loxley Road. The site is a large parcel of undeveloped grassland which provides a varied ecological habitat, and this type of unimproved grassland is becoming very rare within Sheffield. It has never been a garden, only ever used as a paddock by the previous owner, who was a coal merchant. On the officer's report to do with drainage, the officer states that it should not lead to any significant flood risk, but this means that there will be some flood risk. And residents have already, on Studfield Hill and Loxley Road, have previously been flooded out when the applicant on a previous application altered the water table on this very steeply sloping site. I'm hoping that members who went on the site visit will have seen just how steep this site is. Some other points. Where will the vehicles for numbers 494 and 496 park, as both their garages are to be demolished and the drive used for access for the construction vehicles? It's been a condition of previous planning applications for 492, 494 and 496.
Thank you, that's 5 minutes, thank you very much.
Sorry. I would just respectfully ask that members refuse this application. And to quote from one of the planning inspectors, just because you can develop a site does not always mean that you should develop a site.
Our next speaker is William Marshall for the application. Five minutes, William, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon all. My name is William Marshall. I am speaking on behalf of the applicant, Mark Bolby. As highlighted in the officer's report to the committee, the proposals before you have been worked on at length by the applicant and the council's officers to try and find the correct solution to this site. Following the appeal decision in 2014, which was refused solely on the basis of the access being too steep, the design team have looked at various layouts that would achieve the 1 in 12 gradient set by highways officers. A solution has now been found, which is the layout shown today. This features a curving road with a pedestrian footpath, which runs up the side of the existing dwelling, with a turning head at the top before serving the 3 houses. In order to facilitate this access, the existing garage, 494, needs to be relocated to be within the bend of the road. And that's to repeat that proposed garage is for 494. And the land levels need to be altered. However, through the split level design of the houses and the tiered gardens, the change in levels is manageable, achievable, and not uncommon among Sheffield's hills. The levels on site also mean that the impact on the neighbours to the north, above the site, will not be affected as the proposed buildings sit largely below their outlooks over the valley. In addition, the distance between existing and proposed meets the required standard set out in the design guide SPD. Regarding the sightings of the dwellings, their position results in the proposed sitting behind the majestic building, that's 496, limiting the views of them from Loxley Valley. Turning to the design of the dwellings, each is proposed to be contemporary and aims to replicate those found in the Fulwood or Ranmore area of the city. Stone and other high quality materials will be used and can be secured via the recommended condition. Following discussions with officers, an entire storey was removed to reduce massing and better integrate them with their surroundings. But despite this, both internal and external space standards are exceeded. Other matters discussed during the application include replacement tree planting to create a comprehensive and attractive landscaping scheme, 6 months of investigations to ensure that groundwater is not an issue on the site, nor flooding, and ecological surveys to agree on an appropriate scope of mitigation, the latter of which includes bat bricks, bird boxes, planting areas, and swift bricks. Finally, the site is effectively garden land that is surplus to requirements. It is the applicant's view that sites such as this should be utilised to their fullest to help meet the housing needs of the city, especially as the tilted balance does apply. This means that applications for housing should be approved unless there are significant negatives that outweigh. The NPPF recognises also that the contribution of small and medium sites can make to housing delivery, and therefore the proposals, whilst modest, should be seen as a valuable contribution. As a result of the above, and on the balance of weight, the proposed development is considered to be sustainable, of a high quality, and subject to the conditions recommended by officers, we ask that the application is approved by members today. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Andrew, would you like to come back on any of that?
I think a lot of what's been discussed then by those speakers is largely addressed within the report. Just on a few things, I'd just mention, so in terms of the tilted balance, it is a presumption in favour of sustainable development. So if you think about, you know, in that context, we're straight away in the situation where, you know, we're putting great weight to the benefits of the development, but then you would have to find harm and impacts which would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. In the past, the main refusal issues have all centred around highway safety, and as we're hearing, that's being addressed now because compared to previous applications, this proposal includes plans to greatly reduce the gradients on the site in order to get it to the one that's commonplace across all developments and is acceptable at the 1 in 12 one. So we haven't got that issue anymore. I think all the concerns about excavation, earthworks are noted. We don't have all that detail now because I mean, some of it in terms of like structural calculations and things like that go beyond the planning realm and would be looked at by building regulations instead. And I think to commit to undertaking that exercise will be a lot of cost, time and expense. And I think probably the applicant would need to have the comfort of knowing that they've got planning permission for this set of plans before embarking all of that. So what we've done is gone down the route of proposing a series of conditions, which is, you know, guaranteed hopefully to result in that information coming into us and being looked at by the appropriate people within the council. In Highway's case, they're asking to see structural calculations of the retaining structures that will be built around the private drive, because they've got an interest to ensure that stability-wise it's available for use in the long term to avoid that highway safety issue. So they also want to see all the information about the types of wagons that will be coming to the site, frequency, methodology. So that information will be coming into us. It will be reviewed, scrutinised, and only when Highways are content would they recommend that that condition can be discharged. The principle of development was accepted on those previous applications, so I think that you'll have to go back to 2005 to the last time that there was anything mentioned about sort of more the greenfield land status of the site. Obviously things have moved on considerably in this last 20 years with national policy and the presumption in favour of sustainable development. The council doesn't have a 5-year housing land supply. As we know from the local plan process that there is pressure on the green belt, so small sites like this one, which are within the urban fabric of the city, can very much alleviate those pressures and should be utilised really, would be my opinion on that. In terms of parking, the plans do include provision for both 496 and 494, so the garage has been replaced for 494 and it's actually getting upgraded to a double one, and then you can see the parking area that's in front of 496, which is proposed, and some to the rear as well. So yeah, I think that's as many points as I can wish to cover at the moment, if that sounds okay. Thank you.
Move to members' questions. I have Mike followed by Mark.
Thank you, Andrew, for the presentation. Just one point that the speaker, sorry, the lady objecting, she did mention affordable housing, but I think most people around in the chamber know that on sites where there's less than 15 homes being built, there's no requirement to have an affordable homes element. That's to be regretted. I'd very much like to see affordable homes, but we have no control over that. My two questions relate to the spoil from the site. There will be quite a lot of spoil removed. Is that being controlled by condition or by building regulations? And the other question relates to the maintenance of the driveway. There seem to be five. We will end up with 5 homes if this is approved that will have an interest in that driveway from top to bottom. So is there a regime in place for maintaining that driveway? I have to say I don't envy anyone wanting to take the wheelie bins down from the from the 3 homes at the top of the site, but that's up to the people who choose to buy the property.
Andrew?
I think the main condition that I draw attention to would be number 16. So that's the one that Highways have requested to require cross-sectional drawings and details of all retaining structures within the site. Their intention would be to have them reviewed by a structural engineer that works within highways, who could then advise us on whether, you know, that gives them enough comfort, reassurance that that private drive would be structurally sound for the long term. In addition, as part of that same condition, it's proposed to require the applicant to submit a full excavation method statement, including measures to mitigate against unacceptable environmental disbenefit to local residents, the type of vehicle engaged in transporting excavated material, and the frequency of the trips. And we have got another one as well, number 3, which requires a construction and environmental management plan. So I don't know if that answers it, Councillor Chapman.
So you're saying it's covered in those 3 sections then? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, those 2 conditions, yeah. Numbers 3 and 17.
Mark?
Thank you, Chair. The first speaker mentioned construction vehicles. Then you did say that not all the information is available yet about that. But could I just raise this in any case? Considering we're at the site visit, the road is busy. Is there likely to be a turning circle inside the site? Is there enough space for that? And if there isn't enough space for a turning circle, if these construction vehicles are going to be reversing in and out of the site, can we make it mandatory that there's a banksman involved in that operation? Thank you.
Are you talking about the construction phase, sorry, or the operational phase? I guess that would come as part of the condition details, but can I just invite Mark to just set that out a bit further, if that's okay, please, Mark?
Yes, Chair. I personally think there probably is space at the top for construction vehicles to be able to turn, but if there isn't, then there would be a requirement for a banksman on the back to make sure that anything reversing out, that there's some proper temporary traffic management at the bottom. So that would be part of the discharge of that condition that occurs.
Henry?
Well, I was going to ask about the impact of basically cleaning the road, frequency of lorries, which I think you answered in response to Councillor Chaplin's question. That's going to be covered in the construction methodology. But I might have misinterpreted part of Councillor Chaplin's question, because I thought he was talking about the longer term implications of how the covenant is going to be arranged between those 5 properties to maintain that drive, and what easements are going to be in place to guarantee right of access to the 3 properties at the back. Is that what you were getting at? Yeah. So I'll ask that one instead.
I mean, it'd be a private drive, it wouldn't be adopted, so that would be a non-planning consideration.
Any more questions? Richard, sorry, Mr.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of questions, if I may. This issue, obviously, Mike has already mentioned that affordable houses is not relevant in this situation. Fully get that. But I'm more concerned about the density. I mean, we're hearing again and again and again that we need ground for houses. And this is a nice plot of land. So why stick 3 big houses on it? Well, it's a rhetorical question, it doesn't need an answer. But we're kind of, it's below, as I understand it, it's below the actual density requirement. So why are we accepting that? Secondly, the issue of impact on, is it 494? As it stands at the moment, although I didn't go on the site visit, for obvious reasons, I know this site very well. it's in my ward, but I still believe that doesn't impact on my right to speak. The impact on 494 is, as it stands at the moment, the road leading up to the big house goes straight up and is quite away from 494. The proposal is to actually bend the road around, and I think that will have quite a serious effect on the amenity of 494. So I'm concerned about that. And to an extent on 496, but less so. I'm also concerned about the overbearing nature of particularly plot 3, I believe it is, on the Keswick Close property. Both ways in terms of overlooking and just presence, but also in terms of all 3 of the proposed properties, their impact on the big house in the middle of the site, because they will be higher and they will be looking down. And I think that's a concern. I also have, and it was right in the report, one of the objections was that these could be turned into HMOs. Now, I'm not sure financially that would make a lot of sense, but you never know. But is there an option to put a condition on saying these cannot be HMOs? I'm getting the answer, thank you very much. Okay. But also the garage, the new garage, could we put a condition on that it could not be residential, it's converted to residential?
To me, it's a standardised double garage set. I wouldn't really see that as a worry that that's like to happen in regard to that new proposed garage for 494. You can see its footprint there just on that plan, and it's really small, obviously, compared to the actual houses which are showing up on that slide. And yes, the other point to make as well is that actually to convert it into a dwelling would require a separate planning permission in its own right.
Thanks for that answer. Yeah, so those are my questions, really.
I mean, in terms of the density point, I mean, the actual developable area of the site is relatively small because of all the site constraints. So you can sort of see on there, they're limited to just that upper part of the site, and then you've got all these trees that I talked about, and their root protection areas, and then all the concerns and worries what we've heard about traffic impacts and over intensification or use of that private drive. So if you increase the number of houses and the number of demands on it, that's only going to increase the magnitude of those concerns and problems. So that's not the route that we've gone down with this site. We're thinking that actually in this case, a slightly lower density development is more suitable, and that's also fits with the settlement pattern as well. What's around it, because you have got obviously a lot of detached houses in and around the site. And the Keswick Close one property, that's side onto the site. I'll just get back to the photo. And then, so it hasn't got its main windows facing the site, it's conservatory, it's side elevation. So that's just secondary. The applicant would be within the rights to put up something like a 2-metre high fence under permitted development to give privacy to their own site if they wanted to, and that would obviously screen most of the windows from being able to look into the site. In addition, I'll just go back to this slide. This is, you look at the rear elevation, that's actually what all 3 new houses would look like on the back, only that single story, so they'd be quite low impact, I would say, and then factoring in separation distances too. I think that it's a readily acceptable relationship between the two.
Could I just clear that up, because the pictures I took off the website indicate it's a 2-storey. 3?
Yeah, that was the original plans when they were first submitted. We gave advice that they wouldn't be supported, and we asked for amended plans, and so we've been able to negotiate a full story height coming off all 3 properties. So that's been instrumental in officers actually now lending their support for these plans.
Sorry, I'm being a bit dense here. Looking at plot 3, it's got 3 stories on it. According to the picture I'm looking at, 2 of those stories are above ground.
Yeah, that's the front elevation we're talking about. When you're talking about the Keswick Close, that would be face the rear elevation, because obviously we'll go back to the layout plan.
Right.
So the Keswick Close property is the one that's behind or to the north of plot 3. And so all they will see from that conservatory looking into the site is those single story elevations. Okay.
Any more questions? No, comments, please? Mike?
Thank you, Chair. I believe this is an application that we should accept. Clearly, it will be out of the price range for a lot of people, but there will almost certainly be a demand for these kind of properties, even with all the physical limitations that the steep sides bring. But we know plenty of sites around Sheffield. Some of you may live in them, where you have to go up and down fairly steep hills. It's in the nature of this city. It's the city's geography. I think the planners have done a good job in getting this this application to a point where we should be supporting it, and I certainly will. Thank you.
Mark?
I think it is well, bearing in mind that this site is pretty well completely enclosed, it's never going to be much of a sort of wildlife haven. And I think the density of the housing is correct for this site. If more houses were attempted to be crammed in, it would overload the drive and access to the main busy road. So I think the quantity of the housing is correct, and I like the fact that they've been sort of partially sunk down a bit, so they're not so obtrusive to the housing behind. So all in all, given that we do need houses, I will be supporting this application. Thank you.
Glynis?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was nice to actually walk up to a site and think, oh, they're not overdeveloping, which is what we see a lot of the time. Loads of houses fitted into a small space. And the actual design of the houses, and 3 large houses, fits in what is already there. Because there's that large development, large house looks like a mansion, and I think the 3 houses behind it will actually fit with what's already there. Thank you.
Any more comments? No, we'll move to the vote then. So by show of hands, those in favour of the application, please. Against? There are no abstentions. So that is carried. Thank you very much. We now move to excuse me, item 9C, planning application number 23/03/035/FUL former site of Gordon Lamb Limited, 10 Summerfield Street, Sheffield, S11 8HA. And I will ask Sarah to present her report, please.
Thank you, Chair. This slide shows the red line boundary of the site. So Summerfield Street located to the east of the site, Pomona Street to the north, Napier Street to the south. The Porterbrook River runs along the northern site boundary, and you can make that out. It's the blue line on that map. And it's set, the channel is set approximately 4 metres lower than the site level. At present, there is no public access to the river through the site. This is an aerial view of the site demonstrating the site context. As you can see, it's a densely developed urban area on the edge of the city centre. It's characterised by a mixture of residential and commercial development, mainly offices. Immediately to the south of the site, you can make out a sort of linear building, and that is residential development, which was permitted in 2016, which originally was combined with the application site to form a larger redevelopment for residential and student housing. The consent was implemented by the development of the phase 1 building, which you can see there, but the remainder of the site was not redeveloped. However, the development of the phase 1 means that the consent was implemented and that the current application site could be redeveloped in the way that was shown in the 2016 application, which was for 3 blocks of student development. There's also residential development to the north and west boundaries and to the northeast of the site, and there's offices directly to the east of the site. Just run through some photographs quickly. So this photo is taken from Summerfield Street, close to the junction with Pomona Street. And you can see the phase 1 development there, and that's the U-shaped development with red brick and core 10. And to the right-hand side of the screen is a 6-storey residential block dating from around the mid-2000s, and that block is known as Porterbrook 2. And the site is within the foreground and it's surrounded by hoardings. This is a view taken from Pomona Street looking south towards the north elevation of the phase 1 residential block. To the left-hand side of the screen is the building I just showed you previously, which was that 6-storey residential block known as Porterbrook 2. This is a view taken looking across the site towards the north. And this is a close-up view of the phase 1 development. This is a CGI showing, taken from Ecclesall Road looking down Summerfield Street, showing the proposed development, which is behind the quick fit garage there. So it shows a 12-storey block, and behind that there's a lower 10-storey block. And that's another CGI of the U-shaped building which will attach to the phase 1 development. This slide demonstrates the site layout. So it's proposed to develop the site in 2 blocks. So the northernmost block and the smaller block is located at the junction of Pomona Street and Summerfield Street, and that will rise to 12 storeys. And then the second block is located to the south of the site, adjoining the phase 1 development, and is a C-shaped block which rises to 10 storeys. Sorry, just move back there, and just to point out that the proposal involves opening up a footpath through the site next to the river, and that will be a walkway next to the Porterbrook, and there will be public access along that walkway. So this is a view of block 1 taken along Pomona Street, showing the 12-storey block adjacent to the existing 6-storey building to the side. And this is a view taken along Summerfield Street, which shows both block 1 and block 2. So you can see the 12-storey block, which falls to, and then the lower block 2, which is 10 storeys. Just to note as well, on that elevation, to the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a building which is just an outline, and that is the site adjacent to the quick fit garage, which has got planning consent for a 11-storey development. This slide shows the north elevation of Block 2, which would be the elevation fronting the Porterbrook River, visible from that proposed walkway through the site. You can see that there's active frontages on the corners of the building, which will ensure that the walkway is well overlooked. This is a longer section of the site, and again you can note the building to the right hand side there, the upper image, which is the consented scheme on the site to the north. Just run through some floor plans quickly. So this is Block 1, and this is the lower ground floor of Block 1. The areas in orange are a bin store and a cycle store, and a particular note here is that the area to the northeast is a void area, and that void area will allow floodwater to follow the natural path through the site. So the site is within a flood zone, and allowing that void area will allow when the area does flood for the water to flow through and follow its natural path, ensuring that there isn't an increased flood risk elsewhere. This is the upper ground floor level, so the area in purple there is the main entrance and amenity space, and then the areas in grey are plant areas. This is a typical floor plan showing the general arrangement of accommodation, which is a mixture of 1- and 2-bed apartments. And then this is the roof plan, which is an amenity space. Moving on to Block 2, in a similar way, there's a lower ground floor, and the north-east section of that is a void area which will allow floodwater to run through the site following its natural path. The remainder of the lower ground floor will be car parking, and then the areas in orange are a bin store and a cycle store. This is the upper ground floor. The areas in purple are amenity space, which will be used for residents, and the area on the corner in pink is a commercial unit, which will front onto the river and the riverside walk. This is a typical floor plan, which shows the arrangement of accommodation, which is predominantly 1- and 2-bed apartments with a small number of studios. And this is the upper floor plan, which shows some amenity space on the roof area, and again, the layout of the apartments. This is a landscape master plan, which shows the riverside walk. So it essentially follows the line of the river, and it varies in width between a minimum of 3.2 metres and up to about 4.5 metres there. There's some large spill-out amenity spaces to the north and south of that walkway, and there is landscaping proposed throughout in the form of tree planting and other planting. This is just a zoomed-in section of that riverside walk. So I'll just run through the main considerations in relation to the application. So the site is located within a fringe industry and business area in the Unitary Development Plan. However, that designation is over 25 years old now, and the area has changed significantly with high density housing implemented over more recent years. In the draft plan, the site is within a flexible use zone where dwellings are acceptable, and the site is allocated for housing in the draft plan. The principle of residential accommodation has already been established through the previous consent, albeit that was student accommodation, and the proposal is now for C3 residential units. The proposal includes a good mix of unit types, so there are 47.5% of the units are 1-bed, 47.5% of the units are 2-bed, and there's a small number of studios which account for 5% of the apartments. In terms of space standards, the apartments don't fully meet space standards, but they are close, and the application is supplemented by high amenity provision, including at ground floor and externally, members are reminded that at the moment our policy does not include adopted national space standards. In terms of design, the development allows for the opening up of a walkway next to the river, which is a positive aspect, and includes active spaces overlooking that walkway. The proposal reinforces the existing urban grain and Although it is taller than the previous consent, which was up to 10 stories, and this one is up to 12 stories, it is considered to be appropriate given the surrounding context. And the proposal has been tested in long-range views. In terms of heritage, there is a conservation area which runs along the river. So I'll just move back to the site plan. So the conservation area is the Porterbrook Conservation Area, which is a linear conservation area, which at this point predominantly includes the river channel and some small areas to the south of the river channel. The proposal will have some impact on the setting of that conservation area, including introducing a building of scale. However, it will open up the area next to the river, which is not publicly accessible, and it will provide an attractive landscape setting adjacent to that river. There are heritage assets within the wider area, including the general cemetery and some listed buildings, but the assessment submitted with the application shows that the impact on those will be low. In terms of public benefits, the proposal includes regeneration and the provision of housing in the context of the absence of a 5-year housing land supply, and those benefits outweigh the low harm to the heritage identified. In terms of amenity, there have been a number of objections relating to amenity, particularly in relation to the impact on the Porterbrook 2 building, which is that 6-storey building adjacent to the northernmost block that you can see on that plan there. At present, the site is cleared and it offers open views across, so any development will result in changes to existing residents. In terms of separation distances, the minimum separation distance between that projecting element of the Porterbrook 2 block and the southern block here is approximately 20 metres. And that is considered to be an acceptable distance in terms of outlook and privacy, and is actually fairly generous in what is a tight urban area next to the city centre. A daylight and sunlight survey has been submitted, and that does show that Block 2 will have some adverse impact on the residents of the Porterbrook 2 block. And in some cases, the impact on sunlight and daylight is significant, is to a significant adverse level, and it is lower than recommended in the BRE guidance. However, in terms of the context, consideration must be given to the specific circumstances. In particular, the site is immediately to the south of the residential block, and so there will always be some impact from developing land to the south of the existing block. There is an extant permission, which is up to 8 stories on that southern block, opposite the Porterbrook 2. And there is still 20 metres, which is considered to be quite a generous distance, and the outlook from residents in that block will be improved and will be over a landscape river walkway. In addition, the Porterbrook 2 block is located close to the site boundary and enjoys light from outside its site boundary over the river and over the application site. The windows which are most affected are those which have balconies on the rear elevation, and it's considered that those balconies in themselves act as an obstruction and make the development more sensitive to change. The proposal represents the efficient use of a sustainable brownfield site in a dense urban area. In terms of highways, there are 39 parking spaces included within the lower ground floor of Block 2, and 471 cycle spaces. A key issue raised through representation by the Sheaf and Porter River Trust was the potential to include a crossing point between the new Riverside Walk and the existing Riverside Walk on the opposite side of Summerfield Street. However, Highways colleagues have raised concerns about this owing to the proximity of existing junctions, and also the fact that there is an existing control crossing point to the north of the site at the junction of Summerfield Street and Ecclesall Road, and so they've not considered that to be necessary or appropriate in this instance. However, as a compromise, we have included in the highways improvement condition a requirement to provide drop crossings across the road where those two riverside walks would meet. So that will facilitate easier access across the road, particularly for people on bikes or people using wheelchairs or prams. In terms of flooding, the site is partially within flood zone 3A and partially within flood zone 2. A flood risk assessment has been submitted and the sequential and exception tests have been passed. The Environment Agency have not objected, and the proposal includes flood resilience and resistance measures, which will be secured by condition, which include maintaining that flow path through the site and securing finished flow levels which are above the flood levels. In terms of biodiversity, a survey has been done which has shown no protected species on the site, and the application will secure approximately 16% net gain overall within the site itself. That's through the planting of trees and the planting of landscaped areas and the inclusion of habitat boxes. The site is within an area that requires a 10% affordable housing provision. A viability appraisal has been submitted which shows that it would not be viable to provide that provision. However, the heads of terms include that a section 106 clawback will be included, which secures reappraisal of the scheme and potential clawback if the reappraisal shows that the scheme has become more viable than it is at present. I'll just draw attention to the supplementary report. So in that there is a clarification on representations made. So just a clarification on the number of representations made. And that's because one of the objections was said to be on behalf of a number of residents within the block. And so we originally hadn't included those when we totted up the number of objections. And then we've just expanded slightly on that representation which has been received, which relates principally to concerns about impact on daylight and sunlight, and the fact that it's claimed that the developer has issued a light obstruction notice to residents, and that relates to infringement on the legal right to light. I will not read through the officer response in detail because I think I've gone through that in sufficient detail in my presentation here. But just to note that in terms of the light obstruction notice, that is a private legal matter which is separate from the planning process. There are also a few amendments to conditions suggested, so one being the installation of drop curbs on Summerfield Street to facilitate that crossing between the riverside walks, so that's condition 21. And then in terms of condition 34, which relates to the provision of the public access route through the site, that condition has been reworded slightly, and it's also been agreed that the riverside walk should be secured through a section 106 agreement, and so there's some heads of terms there to add to that section 106 agreement. So in terms of a conclusion, the application, the tilted balance is in play in terms of this application because the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. The proposal includes a number of benefits, which includes redeveloping a vacant brownfield site in a highly sustainable location at the edge of the city centre. It makes efficient use of land, and it will open up the site and provide a riverside walk. In terms and there's also economic benefits to redeveloping the site. In terms of disbenefits, there is a slight departure from space standards and there is an adverse impact on daylight and sunlight. However, on balance, it's considered that the balance tips in favour of approval, and that is the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Sarah. We have one speaker for the application, which is James Owens. Please. You have 5 minutes, James.
Good afternoon. With no one having registered to speak against this application, I will try and keep it brief. I appreciate you've had a long session. My name is James Owens, as you've just heard, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant Granger, who is the UK's largest listed residential landlord and a FTSE 250 company. Granger owns and operates Brook Place Apartments, providing good quality, safe and well-maintained homes for your residents. As you've already heard, it already has a planning permission for student accommodation on the remainder of the site, which remains valid and could be built out. This application is for an alternative and improved scheme on the remaining cleared part of the land. Granger wants to provide more good quality homes to rent, building upon the success of Brook Place Apartments. We hope that the opportunity to accommodate some of your housing need on previously developed land will be welcomed. As goodness knows, you're under a huge pressure to release greenfield and greenbelt sites. This application follows your brownfield first regeneration approach. In case you missed it from the officer presentation a moment ago, it should also be noted that your new draft local plan allocates this site for housing, not for more students. There are some objections, but for such a central built-up location, that is not surprising. With this redevelopment site having been cleared, its open nature was always going to be temporary. Any new buildings would reduce this openness, but the resulting amenity, including the retained levels of daylight, will be in line with what one would expect in a city centre urban environment. This application has also been thoroughly scrutinised by the Environment Agency, which has resulted in considerable delays, but it means you can be sure that the new homes will be safe for their occupants and the development will not increase flood risk for properties or people elsewhere. It's going to be a good-looking scheme with the buildings designed by an award-winning architect using good quality materials and new landscaping with substantial greening. The proposed buildings are set back from Porterbrook, creating a space for a new riverside walkway and areas of public realm, opening up access to the river for the first time. It's a scheme our whole design team is proud of and will enhance this part of your city. This is a chance to at last complete the redevelopment of this partially built out site. It's a good news story, I'd suggest, and we really hope that you will all want to support it in line with the strong officer recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, any response now? Members' questions then, please. Henry?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sarah. I've got two main questions, really. Firstly, the most sort of negative thing we heard during the presentation was the phrase significantly adverse effect in terms of the availability of light for the residents of Porterbrook 22. In terms of that light availability calculation, was it significantly different during the extant planning application of 8 stories to the current one?
Unfortunately, we don't have an assessment which compares it to the 8-storey development, so I can't accurately answer that question.
Thanks. The second one was the public access down the river sounds absolutely fantastic, but I can only find a reference to it as public access. Do you know whether it's going to be accessible to pedestrians and cyclists, and is it going to be built to local transport note 1/20 best practice if it is accessible to cyclists and pedestrians? Because to the southwest of the site is a really, really popular cycle route through the city that then goes on to go through Cemetery Park, which is currently quite awkward to access from Ecclesall Road or St Mary's Gate, and this would be a really nice way for families to get into that.
I don't think that the level of detail as to whether it's a combined route has been necessarily secured through this application. However, similar riverside walks are combined combined, and I think the width of this is such that it would be possible to accommodate both pedestrians and cyclists. In condition 34, we've asked for details, and we've got the heads of terms, which also requires the details. So through those two elements, we could consider that further.
Would it be appropriate for me to propose that we secure that by condition at this point?
In terms of putting the actual wording of joint let me just see if Mark's got any comments on that.
Chair, there's been a recently approved and constructed and occupied block of flats quite close to Decathlon around the back there, where a recreational walkway has been provided along that section of the Porter Brook. And whilst it's not been described as a shared cycle pedestrian route, it's acknowledged that it's a really attractive recreational route for cyclists. And that would be the case here as well. I mean, I used to live on Stoker-Lees Road and cycled quite regularly along Stoker Walk around the back of the General Cemetery, which brought you up to Stoker-Lees Road, and that's a really popular used route for cyclists, and the width of this would be greater than the width of that, and it would be similar in width to the existing walkway on the other side of Summerfield Street. So the geometry and the widths lend themselves to it being a shared, as the Upperdon Trail is a shared pedestrian cycle route with minimum widths of 3 metres. So the widths here are a minimum of 3.2 metres and wider. So cyclists definitely wouldn't be precluded from using it. Whether it would be designated a shared pedestrian or cycle route, I'm not sure, but in essence it doesn't matter, because as we've been developing along the River Porter, the theme has been to provide geometry that suits both for recreational purposes. And I think the LTN 120, where, for instance, the recently completed retail development near the Herries Road junction, around the back of the Sheffield Wednesday ground, I mean, that's all LTN 120 compliant, being a commuter route for cyclists. So I think the recreational side and the commuter side, I think we can afford to go down more of a shared route when it's recreational by the side of the river.
Just for clarification, Mark, what I'm hearing here there is you think it would be suitable for shared use. As it is private land, and without it being conditioned at this point, there would be nothing to stop someone saying this is private, no cycling. I would still like to propose that the wording is changed to cycle and pedestrian access.
Okay, and just to jump in on that as well, in terms of its geometry, the minimum width is 3.2, so it would be suitable from the dimensions that Mark suggested. So we could potentially add that wording into condition 34. So we can slot in something that says for cycles and pedestrians. We could slot it into condition 34 and into the heads of terms of the 106.
Great. I would like to propose that we change the wording for condition 34 and the heads of terms to include the word cycling and pedestrians, assuming that I have some support in the room, that is. So
I can second that, Chair, thank you.
Have a show of hands, please. Marianne?
Sorry, Chair, just a quick one. We've added an extra bullet point to the highway improvement condition, asking for tactile paving and drop curbs to connect the existing and the proposed. And we were resistant to controlled crossings, zebra crossing, or traffic lights and a push button because of the arrangement of the side roads and the junctions and the proximities of different junctions. But just to let you know, I mean, you probably might be aware anyway, the Nether Edge wedge scheme does actually propose traffic lights at the Napier Street, Summerfield Street junction with push button controls in as well. So, I mean, that's a committed scheme more or less now. I think the funding's secured, so. Yeah.
Marianne?
Thanks. Just a few quick questions. So largely, I think this is a good proposal. We obviously need more homes and not of the student accommodation type. It's good use of brownfield site. I do find it very disappointing, though, that the applicant is not providing 10% affordable housing. We've heard what a successful company Granger PLC is, so it's disappointing that they can't provide any affordable homes. I note the report says Section 106 agreement will be required to secure viability reappraisal in due course. Could you just talk us through that?
So in terms of the reappraisal, we will set a trigger within the Section 106 that if the development does not reach a certain stage of completion by a certain date, that they would have to reappraise the proposal. And that generally tends to be if they've not reached Eve's level within 3 years of the consent, that they would then have to do the reappraisal. And if that reappraisal showed that it was more viable than the original scheme had showed, then that money would be secured for the provision of affordable housing.
Okay, yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I mean, also a bit disappointing that it's not adhering to national size standards. So just for clarification, if we had our emerging local plan, would those national size standards have to be adhered to?
When the local plan is adopted, then we will have a policy requiring those space standards to be provided. So we would be in a much stronger position to be able to push for that.
Okay, but at the moment it's not enough to reject on. Okay. And then just looking at the supplementary information that we got today, there was the representation from the Sheaf and Porters Rivers Trust. So, I mean, I think the contribution to the public realm and the Porter Brook is really, really welcome, and it's a very good example. Just looking at their the response, so are these amended conditions as amended here? So are they the conditions that are actually we're voting on today?
Yeah, so I assume that the representation came up on the back of them actually seeing the report, and as part of that, as I mentioned previously, they wanted a crossing point across between the two walkways, but that wasn't considered appropriate. And so they have suggested in this representation received today that there are drop curbs at either side, and that condition 21 that you can see there includes that. So it's the last bullet point. So a drop crossing, tactile paving, uncontrolled pedestrian crossing on both sides of Summerfield Street in the vicinity of the Porter Brook. So that's the bit that's been added to condition 21, is that last bullet point.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief because, in fact, Marianne's asked all my questions for me. Thank you. But there is one. I welcome the electric vehicle charging points to be put in, but given that we're really promoting bicycle use, could we ask the applicant or condition the applicant to put in some cycle charging points in the car parking area or wherever the bike's going to be stored? It seems an opportunity missed.
We haven't got a policy that requires that, so I don't think it's something that we could secure by condition. However, we could potentially include a directive to advise them to include that if and advise them that will be a benefit.
Yeah, do whatever you can. I'm confident that the applicant will hear what I'm trying to say and pass on the information to whoever makes a decision.
Do you want to propose that then?
Certainly, I propose we have a directive that there should be an appropriate number of cycle charging points on the property.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Chair. And I do think that last one is important, given that we are dealing with flats that are fairly limited with space inside. So the prospect of taking your bicycle up to the 6th floor or 7th floor to go and charge it in your flat is not a very appealing prospect. Again, thanks to Marianne for asking the questions that I would have asked, which really takes me on to the climate change mitigation. Really good to see photovoltaic panels being installed on the roof space. What I would like to see, can you show us where the where the air source heat pumps would go around the buildings. Is that possible?
That's not shown on the plans at the moment. At the moment they've done kind of a feasibility appraisal as to how they could provide that 10% renewable energy requirement, and they've said it could be air source heat pumps and solar panels, but that condition requires further details to be submitted when the final measures have been considered. So we don't have that shown on the plans at present.
So when would members get sight and knowledge of that?
We would expect the detail to be provided through the condition about 10% renewable energy, which, if you give me a second, I can refer to. I think it's condition number 3, which requires details of how renewable energy will be provided.
I'm concerned really how it can look with air source heat pumps, depending where you place them around buildings, whether they would be readily visible or whether they'd be, because you can't really mask them, because the whole point of them is that they draw in air. Something for officers to consider.
Yes, noted. It depends where they are placed, but you would hope that they will be placed sensitively.
Can we move to comments, please? Gary?
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to have to go back to the size of some of the flats. I know we're not signed up to national at the moment, and the developer knows this, and all developers that come through to this planning board have come with different sizes properties. But it just, can you tell me how many are undersized on the national average, which we're not signed up to?
Just find the relevant part of the report. Bear with me a second. So if you look at page 162, that provides the detail about the sizes of the accommodation. And essentially it says that, typically the studio apartments are 37.5 square metres, and so I think that they would meet space standards. The one bed units are 43 square metres, and the space standards for those vary. If it's a one person unit, it's 37 square metres, but if it's a two person, one bed unit, it's 50 square metres. So in that case, there would be a sort of a 7 square metre discrepancy. And in terms of the 2 bed units, the average size is 67 square metres, whereas in the space standards for a 4 bed, 2 person unit is 70 square metres. So there's about a 3 square metre difference there as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Any further comments? No. Can we move to a vote, please, by show of hands? No. I've asked twice if there's any comments. So you're on comments, Mecco?
Yeah, it's a shame that we haven't got to a point where we're meeting national space standards, but I would have thought, given that the writing is on the wall, and once the local plan's been adopted, developers will be required to meet better standards, that any developer at this point is not meeting those standards, is shooting themselves in the foot, because their units will become less and less desirable the more and more developments we build that are to a higher standard. And hopefully this building will stand up and be in use far, far longer than the very short gap between now and when we have a local plan. So we can't command them to build units to a better standard, but I would have thought that commercial sense would.
else comment? No? Can we move to a vote, please? Those in favour of the application, please raise your hands.
Okay, yeah.
Against? Thank you. That is carried. We now move to item 10, recorded planning appeal submission of the decision, page 177 of the agenda. To note, unless there are any questions. Mike?
It's not a question, it's a comment. The Broom Hill appeal, which was dismissed, it was interesting to see that it was the fact that it's in a conservation area, and that was significant to the inspector. That's my reading anyway of that. And so all that hard work that Peter Marsh and others have put into that has given them some benefit there. And to express sadness that the inspector did not feel that it was viable for the Carter Knoll application to have affordable housing. That is disappointing, and we've just noted it with the application we've dealt with just now, and I really do worry that the whole process of viability is not working in favour of affordable housing at this time. Hopefully that will change, but I'd like to know what we could do to hurry that along. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Item 11, date of next meeting, that will be on Tuesday the 13th of January at 2 p.m. in the Town Hall. Thank you all very much.